What is it like to be courted by a male bear in the Arctic? Ziyao just transmigrated into an albino brown bear. Now he's kissing my butt to verify my identity. All because 3 days ago, humans mistook a brown bear for a polar bear and released it. But instead of trying to retrieve it, humans decided to go with the mistake. The girl opened her eyes and turned into an Arctic black tiger. Not blind. Can't you see I have a round face and round ears? In a snowstorm at -40 degrees, Shijie was so hungry she gnawed on ice. Then she turned and came across a female bear's corpse. And around the corpse, there were 2 rows of small bear footprints. And 1 row of huge bear footprints. They were a male bear's footprints. But what puzzled her was, male bears usually only kill cubs. So why was this female bear killed by a male bear? Shijie didn't have time to think too much. Right now, there was a ready-made feast before her eyes. Enough food for her next 3 days. But this was also a bear. Should she really eat it? Shijie struggled internally for a while. Finally gathering her courage, she moved closer. Opening her mouth, she saw the female bear's corpse with its fur torn open, revealing the flesh and blood. But just as she was about to bite down, Shijie hesitated again. She tried several times, but just couldn't bring herself to bite into it. Looking at the cub footprints nearby, she figured the mother bear was probably killed. While protecting her cubs, Shishia's already unsteady heart grew even more wavering. At this very moment, suddenly the sound of snow being trampled came from behind Shishia. From behind him, another polar bear slowly emerged. Its figure was as tall as a mountain. Clearly, it was a male bear. Blood stained half of this bear's face. Shishia's pupils contracted. It was the male bear that had killed the mother bear. At this moment, the male bear lightly tapped its nose in the air twice, as if sniffing its scent. Finally, its gaze fell on the mother bear's corpse at Shishia's feet. Then it bared its teeth. Shishia was so frightened that he took several steps back. The other seemed particularly fixated on his round face. Extremely concerned, its eyes kept wandering over his round face, plate and round ears. Shishia feared it might suddenly pounce. A low growl rumbled in its throat. He kept backing away. Meanwhile, the male bear across from him kept lifting its head and sniffing continuously. Finally, it looked at him as if deep in thought. Suddenly, it lifted its foot and began walking toward him. Shijie was so frightened he turned and ran. Food? Mother bear? He didn't care about any of that anymore. Right now, he just wanted to escape. He hadn't run more than a few steps when a tremendous force struck him from behind. It sent him, the whole bear, tumbling onto his back. The next second, a massive bear paw landed heavily on his chest. He wanted to struggle, but found he couldn't move at all. Then, a warm, moist breath hit his nose, immediately followed by a thick, heavy smell of blood invading his nostrils. Shijie was too scared to move. The male bear seemed quite satisfied with his statue-like stillness. The paw pressing on his chest relaxed slightly. The male bear's dark nose moved closer to Shishia's face again. A strange feeling rose in Shishia's heart. Could this guy just be trying to smell him? However, this annoying male bear seemed to have no sense of boundaries. After circling his face, its head began moving downward. Shijie held his breath. He could clearly feel the other's snout, almost reaching into the hollow of his neck. This wouldn't do. If this male bear changed its mind and decided to kill him, he wouldn't even have a chance to struggle. Shijie suddenly let out a fierce roar. His thick bear paw slammed hard onto the male bear's face. The male bear was stunned by this swipe. Shijie seized the moment to flip over and shake off the blood on its body. Its round, rolling body charged toward the male bear. The male bear also reacted, letting out an angry roar in fury. Just as it raised its paw, preparing to meet the challenge of this strange female bear, it discovered the other party had run fiercely right up to its face, and then brushed right past it. The huge, round, furry ball ran extremely fast, its stout limbs digging forward frantically. Shattered snow splashed to both sides. Unexpectedly, the male bear did not give chase. Instead, it just stayed where it was, merely watching calmly as that female bear fled in panic. On its plump, round bottom, an equally round and fluffy tail bounced up and down with each running stride, looking very springy. The male polar bear's eyes gradually darkened, staring at the tail for quite a while, only withdrawing its gaze when Shijie had run completely out of sight. It walked back behind the snowdrift, dragged out the corpse of an Arctic fox, and slowly moved it next to the female bear's corpse. At that moment, a bear's roar suddenly came from afar. Another male polar bear came trotting over from the distance. Caesar, long time no see. Locke swayed its head as it slowly approached. Caesar grunted in acknowledgement, lowered its head, tore off a piece of meat, and chewed. Only when Locke got closer did it exclaim in surprise. "Isn't this Kaya? You killed her?" Kaya is still carrying the little bear, although it's already mating season now. "But you're too impatient," Locke said, looking around for where the little bear's corpse is. "You won't let them go, will you?" And Caesar didn't even lift his head. "Take another sniff." Locke lifted his head and sniffed again. It really wasn't you who killed it. There are 2 male bears. No wonder Kaya got separated from her cub. Oh, and there's a female bear too. Also a scent I've never smelled before. A new female bear has come here. A flash of surprise passed through Locke's eyes. But this female bear's scent is a bit strange. Caesar stopped chewing in his mouth, suddenly remembering how that female bear ran away earlier. The ears are round. The face is round. The body is round. Even the tail is round. It really is quite strange. Locke shook his head. "I apologize to you, my brother. But you have to know. You've already killed at least 5 polar bears. So it's not entirely my fault. He and Caesar are biological brothers." Caesar wouldn't lay a hand on him. An Arctic fox was quickly eaten up. Caesar even left a hind leg for Locke. Locke gobbled it down in a few bites. Not full. Caesar glanced at the polar bear corpse on the ground. "There's still some here." A trace of resentment flashed in Locke's eyes. "Why are you always like this? Now there is a lot of food. I don't want to eat the same kind." Caesar gave an expressionless turned around, slowly began walking in the direction Shijia had just left. Locke regretfully glanced at the dead Kaya, shook his head, hurried after Caesar's departing steps. "Caesar, wait. 3 unfamiliar bears suddenly appeared in my territory. Aren't you curious?" Meanwhile, Shijia was fleeing for his life. But remembering that polar bears have an excellent sense of smell, running in a straight line like this is useless. So Shijia began to scramble his escape route, sometimes looping back around, sometimes moving straight sideways, even rolling in the snow. In the end, he himself didn't know where he had rolled to. But it was clear that male bear hadn't caught up. Shijia was quite satisfied with his result, shook the snow off his body, prepared to continue searching for the lake. But just then, Shishia's foot stepped into empty air, and he tumbled down a steep snow slope. After a dizzying spin, Shijia looked up and was instantly stunned. He seemed to have returned to the area with the mother bear's corpse. Though it was still some distance from the body, Shijia felt a bit panicked, subconsciously looked toward the direction of the mother bear's body. Fortunately, the male bear was nowhere to be seen. Only then did Shijia relax. However, what he didn't expect was, when he turned his head, he met 2 pairs of bewildered eyes. They were actually 2 little polar bear cubs. Shijia guessed. They were probably the cubs of that mother bear. They actually hadn't been killed by the male bear. So rare. At this moment, the 2 cubs were holding onto each other, looking at Shijia with terrified eyes. The slightly larger one was the first to let out a threatening bear roar. The imposing manner was quite full. It's a pity the voice that came out was too childish. A soft and thin little sound, like a little lamb. The teddy bear also seemed not to have expected it. Its own fierce roar would come out. With this effect, stunned, it froze on the spot. The other cub clung tightly to him, its little head completely buried under his belly. Sensing his brother's fear, the larger cub simply hid him behind his back. Trembling, it stood up, shielding his brother in front, clearly trembling with fear itself. Yet it still had to muster up courage to face a behemoth like Shijia. After letting out 2 weak, breathless cries, the cub mustered all its courage and charged towards Shijia, attempting to scare Shijia away. Shijia just sat there, watching the little thing charging over, baring its teeth, neatly raised a paw, and just gave a push. The poor little cub tumbled several times in the snow, shaking its head as it sat up. There were still 2 bits of fluff stuck to his nose. He looked exceptionally silly. But Shijia felt she was born a cold, hard woman. She remained completely unmoved. He dared not go back to eat the mother bear's corpse. These 2 little ones looked pretty good. The meat should be very tender and very fresh. Eat one and keep the other one to eat when he couldn't find food. Thinking this, Shijia sat up, bearing a mouth of sharp teeth, slowly approaching the 2 bear cubs. The larger cub realized he had no chance of fighting back. He resigned himself to fate and hugged his younger brother. Actually, he could have run, The smaller cub looked much weaker. But he just didn't. 10 sharp canine teeth had already touched the trembling ear of the cub. But after a moment, he expressionlessly withdrew his mouth, and with a swipe of his paw, pushed both bear cubs' heads into the snow. It seems I'm not cold-hearted enough. Shijia thought this, and decisively turned to leave, leaving the 2 bear cubs right there. Abandoning the food that was practically in his mouth, he had done his utmost. If he were to soften his heart and help these 2 cubs again, that was unthinkable. So Shijia quickened his pace and swiftly left this place. However, darkness fell quickly. The temperature plummeted. Shijia didn't find any food. Cold and hungry, in the end, could only slink back dejectedly to the little polar bear's hiding place. If they were still there, then he would eat them. Shijia began to mutter to himself, then quickened his pace, originally not holding out much hope, but never expected. The 2 little polar bears were actually still staying in the same spot. The 2 cubs were snuggled together, hiding among the dead branches in the snow, gazing longingly outside. Shijia knew they were waiting for their mother to return. Unfortunately, they would never get to. The little polar bears, catching the scent, accurately looked toward Shishia's position, seemingly not expecting him to actually come back again. The 2 cubs instantly grew tense, continuously trying to hide deeper into the dead branches. Shijia wouldn't give them that chance, ran over and pressed them both to the ground with 1 paw each. The little polar bear's body temperature through the pads of the bear paws came through in a continuous stream. The warmth made Shijia sigh. It's just that these 2 furball hot water bottles weren't very well behaved, both lowering their heads trying to bite Shishia's claws. Shijia suppressed the irritation in his heart, directly tucked the 2 cubs into his embrace. This was just too warm. Shijia felt that this cold-hearted man was almost warmed through by these 2 bear cubs. Now the ones getting flustered became the 2 bear cubs. You must know, apart from their mother, no bear had ever come this close to them. The only explanation was that this fat bear wanted to eat them both. As expected, the 2 bear cubs struggled fiercely. Shijia had to hold them down. So he bared his teeth and threatened, "Behave, or I'll eat you 2 cubs." Sure enough, they stopped moving out of fear. But to his surprise, the larger polar bear cub suddenly mumbled, "Why are you holding us? And you're so hungry. Why aren't you eating us?" Shijia said in surprise. "So you can talk?" Then he felt puzzled. "How do you know I'm very hungry?" As soon as the words were spoken, his stomach growled with hunger. The 2 cubs shrank back fearfully, but the braver one still couldn't help asking, "You have Mom's scent on you. The smell of blood is also very strong. Did you kill Mom?" As soon as the words were spoken, the other little bear began to whimper. 1 cub whimpered softly. The other had red-rimmed eyes, both gazes fixed on Shijia. Shijia sighed. "Your mother is indeed dead. The body is not far away. I'm sorry, but I am not the bear who killed her." The 2 cubs did not doubt his words. Learning of their mother's death, they were very sad, faced with the fear and confusion of surviving. Now even the bold, little bear cub, "I couldn't help but hug my younger brother and cry." Shijia couldn't stand the cold anymore. He grabbed a bear cub and tucked it into his embrace. It was already dark now. "It's very dangerous outside. When the sky brightens, I'll take you to find your mother." The 2 bear cubs still weren't comfortable in Shia's embrace, but they didn't dare to resist. The bolder one asked sulkily, "Why are you holding us? You're not our mother." Only a mother bear would hold its cubs. Hearing this, Shijia stuffed the little head into his chest. His voice, trembling from the cold, was brief and clear. "Shut up. This is the advance payment for me taking you to find your mother." Only then did the 2 bear cubs fall silent, enduring the discomfort, held in Shishia's embrace. The Arctic night is exceedingly long. Shijia endured the cold and slept for a while. But after being awakened by the chilly wind, he could no longer fall asleep. He could only hug the 2 little bears and huddle among the withered branches. He looked up and counted the stars. It must be said, although this damned place is cold and desolate, the only good thing is that the stars are brighter than elsewhere. When he was once captured and taken to the zoo, he could only look up and count the stars. But the stars there were small and few. During the day, he had to face those frenzied visitors, who threw food for amusement, forcing the brown bears to fight, even intentionally injuring him. In the zoo, he never had a single good day. The biting cold wind howled. Shijia shivered in his sleep, feeling as if his nose was frozen solid. He wanted to wake himself up, struggling to open his eyes. But in reality, he was still deep asleep. This restless sleep not only failed to give him enough rest, instead made him even more tired. Unaware of how much time had passed, his cold nose was suddenly covered with warmth. Just as he comfortably stretched his limbs, a sense of suffocation suddenly surged not long after. Shijia flailed his forepaws, trying to struggle. But it was to no avail, until he was finally choked awake. The moment he opened his eyes, he met a pair of dark, pimple-like eyes. The other's little paw was still resting on his nose. Noticing he had awakened, it got a fright, hastily scrambled and tumbled back into the nearby pile of dry grass, peeking out at him together with another pair of beady eyes. Shijia took a deep breath, helplessly sat up, then licked its paws on the snow, shaking its fur from time to time, looking quite leisurely. After quite a while, the two creatures hiding in the grass finally couldn't wait any longer, rustling and shuffling for a good while. Bear Big struggled to come before Shijia. Shijia didn't utter a sound, just glanced at him like that. The little bear instantly bristled. The ears beside its face even flared open. Seeing this, Shijia secretly chuckled to himself. The one who had covered his nose with a paw earlier was the sister. The sister seemed more independent and bold. Bear Big looked up at the behemoth before him, finally mustered up courage, whispered, "You promised us to take us to find Mom." She paused here. A hint of grievance tinged her tone. Slept for so long. Hearing his words, Shijia then suddenly realized. So he had slept for this long. No wonder the two little ones tried to wake him. Looking at the icy, snowy landscape already bright with daylight, this finally felt a twinge of guilt. "Follow me." Saying this, he walked toward the direction of the mother bear's corpse. Shijia did not ask the two little bears for their names. In the human world, there is a saying that names represent bonds. From the moment a name is learned, a bond begins to form. Shijia was not prepared to take responsibility for these two little bears, nor did he want to be heartbroken in the future. He and they were merely passing travelers in each other's lives. Getting closer and closer to the place of the mother bear's corpse, Shijia stopped. Ahead was a steep snow slope. After confirming that only the three of them were in this place, Shijia began to think about how to get down. He looked left and right. It was all steep snow slopes. Shijia extended his claws toward the steep snow slope. The first two steps were quite successful. Then, using all four paws, carefully lifting each paw, he began to step downward. Just as he thought he could walk down the snow slope like this, his butt was suddenly hit by something. 10 breaths synchronized. Too late to react. His vision blurred. His bare head plunged face down into the snow, followed immediately by a series of death rolls. His body tumbled down the snow slope like a ball. This rolling left him utterly disoriented. Paws braced against the ground. He was just about to sit up, when two more sounds of snowball tumbling reached his ears. Then his head suddenly felt heavy. The young, startled cry of a little polar bear rang out. Shijia, with the little bear on his head, sat up expressionlessly, and incidentally raised a paw to stop the other one from tumbling, about to collide with his white furry ball. Obviously these two guys are the culprits. The two bear cubs realized they had caused trouble. Their eyes looked at him in terror. Shijia let out a light sigh, lifted his foot to brush the bear cubs off his head. "Your mother is over there." Go before his words even finished. The two bear cubs were already heading in the direction he said, sprinting away, their small bodies struggling in the thick layer of accumulated snow. Even though their entire bodies were already buried in the snow, they still tried hard to hold their heads high. Shijia watched the two bear cubs with a complicated gaze, finally reaching the side of the mother bear's corpse, their little paws desperately digging the mother bear out of the snow. The two little ones lay down beside the mother bear's body, their little faces rubbing against the mother bear's body incessantly, even though this body no longer had any warmth, and could never sit up to protect them like before. In the end, they still did as they had done 10,000 times before, obediently hiding under the mother bear's belly. No matter the race of the offspring, there is a natural love and dependence on the mother. It's a pity that such a scene, which should have been warm, now looks, besides desolate, also carries the cruelty of the world. Shijia couldn't bear to watch and withdrew his gaze. He had already done what he promised. Now it was time to strive for his own survival. He took one last look at the two bear cubs. Shijia walked in the opposite direction of the snowy mountain. He didn't know the way. He could only choose a direction and trek a long distance, attempting to rely on luck to find food. But after running continuously for half an hour, he found himself going in circles in the same place. At that moment, his heart instantly sank to the bottom. He looked around, finally fixed his gaze on a withered tree in the distance, then lifted his foot and jogged towards the withered tree. And right behind the trail of footprints Shijia left, a small head suddenly emerged from the snow. Little paws stepped on the huge paw prints he left behind. Why is he running back? Big Bear also crawled out from the snow. His beady eyes were also full of confusion. Little Bear lowered its head, sniffed at the footprints on the ground, then rubbed against its sister again. Should we really follow him? Yeah, Big Bear seems to have his own ideas. Immediately, the two little ones quietly followed. However, after another 3 hours, Master Bear, who had been busy in vain all day, finally gave up looking for the seaside, slumped listlessly onto the snowy ground. It seems he is destined to go hungry today. At the same time, two kinds of scents flowed into his nostrils. One of the smells was very familiar. It was those two little bears. Shijia opened his eyes, carefully observed the surroundings, attempting to find those two little furballs. The results, however, were not as satisfactory. If they follow, he would just act as if he didn't smell them. Anyway, he absolutely would not take them with him. Speaking of this, Shijia lay back down on the snow, closed his eyes and began to rest. Running for a long time was too physically draining. Shijia just lay there in the snow, unknowingly fell asleep. He didn't know how much time had passed, when suddenly the sound of snow being trampled rang in his ears. Not long after, the sound grew louder and louder. Shijia was startled awake, lifted his head and looked bewilderedly towards the direction of the sound. Two small white furballs were wriggling, emerging from the top of a blood pool, tumbling and scrambling as they towards him. Shijia blinked, squinted his eyes to try and see more clearly. Then, 2 seconds later, Shijia instantly froze. A massive figure actually appeared at the top of the snow slope. The two bear cubs, seeing him, seemed to see a protector, instantly hid behind him, their heads burrowing straight under his belly. Shijia was so startled he jolted. Before even sitting up, he started backing away. But the two bear cubs were already scared out of their wits, hastily followed and squeezed further under Shijia's belly. The large bear behind had already raised its paw and walked over, forcing him to retreat again and again. Caesar coldly eyed the 3 bears huddled together, feeling somewhat surprised in his heart. Caesar had seen those 2 little bear cubs. They were Kaya's bear cubs. He had just wanted to casually bite the 2 little brats to death. He didn't expect these 2 little brats to be quite quick in their reactions. What he even less expected was these 2 little brats led him to the bear he was looking for. Looking at Shijia blocking in front of the 2 little bear cubs, the color in Caesar's eyes grew even deeper. Was he trying to protect them? At this moment, Caesar bared a mouthful of sharp fangs, slowly advancing. Shijia recognized Caesar as the male bear who killed the 2 cubs' mother. At this moment, he was truly caught between a rock and a hard place. The 2 little furballs had clearly already taken him as their last lifeline. Shijia took a deep breath, although he hadn't intended to protect them from the start. But now, just abandoning them here like this did indeed seem somewhat inhumane, not unbear-like. Thinking of this, Shijia hardened his heart, simply gritted his teeth and confronted this male bear. Before the male bear's claws could strike the 2 cubs, Shijia scooped the 2 little bear cubs under his belly, securely covering them, then let out a fierce bear roar, suddenly raised his front paws and slammed them down hard. His exposed claws were sharp and pointed, extremely intimidating. This behavior in Caesar's eyes was nothing but provocation. Conflict was imminent. Both bears roared and charged towards each other. For furry paws flail up and down in the air, pushing and scratching each other. 2 little bears hide behind, watching dumbstruck. Shijia looks like he's fighting fiercely with the male bear opposite. But in reality, he's already starting to feel the strain. So he decides to end it quickly. Might as well just use his mouth. If he can't bite the neck, he'll bite the paws. Caesar's paw stings sharply. He can't help but fly into a rage. He also opens his mouth, preparing to take a vicious bite at Shijia. Shijia very consciously hides his own neck. But then something unexpected happens. The male bear actually bites his ear. What a careless mistake. He forgot his ears are on top of his head. Is he about to become a one-eared bear? No, that would be too ugly. He can't accept that. Caesar bites down on Shijia's ear, sensing that he's still not behaving, and still wants to struggle. Just as he thinks to tear his ear right off, he looks down and sees the she-bear's eyes, actually faintly glistening with tears. Yet he hesitates for a moment. Somehow, bewitched, he doesn't deliver the fatal bite. Looking at the she-bear who still has his paw in her mouth, refusing to let go. His eyes darken. Might as well use his size advantage and lunge forward with force. Shijia is caught off guard, flipped over with all four paws in the air. Before he can react, Caesar's massive paw slammed down heavily beside his ear. His entire body pressed down brazenly upon Shijia. Lowering his head, he unleashed a fierce bear roar towards him. Exhaling from his mouth, a warm, damp, bloody breath struck Shishia's nose tip. The weakness hidden in Shishia's heart burst its dam at this moment. His forelimbs instantly lost their strength, beginning to splay out to both sides. A gurgling sound issued from his throat. This was a sign of submission. Caesar was not at all surprised by such a reaction. He had defeated many bears. In the end, they all begged for mercy like this. And not a single she-bear had ever provoked him like this. This strange she-bear could last this long before him was already enough to make him look at her with new respect. But since the she-bear had now yielded, he was satisfied, and so began to exercise the victor's rights. Shijia watched as this male bear's head lowered closer and closer. His heart felt like it was jumping into his throat. The male bear's wet nose rubbed from the top of his head to the side of his ear. Shijia, the whole bear, went numb. His entire body stiffened, and the other's actions grew increasingly unrestrained. The twitching nose tip began to move downward, gradually pressing towards the neck he had wanted to kiss last time, but had failed to touch. Shishia's heart trembled. Indeed, it still wasn't acceptable. In the blink of an eye, just as Caesar intended to continue sniffing downward, a sharp, fierce gust of wind suddenly brushed past the tip of his ear. A round, furry bear paw came whizzing through the air. It smacked hard onto Caesar's furry bear face. Probably didn't expect him to dare fight back. Of course, it might also have been stunned from the hit. Taking advantage of the male bear's momentary confusion, Shijia raised a paw and delivered several more smacks, pat pat asterisk. The force was just right, stunning without brain damage. Watching the frenzied state of the opponent, Shijia counted down silently in his heart, 3-1. Then, using all his strength, he gave a fierce roll, successfully dodging the swiping bear claw. The next second, a crisp asterisk was heard. The spot where Caesar's front paw struck instantly collapsed, dragging the massive bear head down as it plunged into the snow hole. Shijia looked at his handiwork with satisfaction. Looking at Caesar stuck in the hole, Shijia turned around, kicked his hind legs back twice, scraping snow, and scooped a couple more pawfuls. Only when snow filled the hole did he feel avenged. He then ran towards the two little bear cubs not far away who were already dumbstruck. Run! The two cubs snapped out of their daze as if waking from a dream, hastily stumbling to follow Shijia. They began to flee desperately, seeing Bear to running too slowly. Shijia directly picked him up by the scruff with his mouth. They ran for who knows how long, till they had no strength left. Only then did Shijia stop. To his surprise, the other little bear actually had great perseverance. It had just kept following him and persevered through it all. Shijia scanned the area with his eyes, finally leading the two cubs to hide beneath a rocky outcrop. He set the cub down. He only felt his mouth was both sour and numb. Gasping for breath with his mouth open, he was out of breath. The recent situation just now was really dangerous. If it weren't for the suspended ice layer, he didn't know what would have happened in the end. Just lost in thought. A sudden warmth came from beside his feet. The two little furballs actively came close again. Bear Big hung his head low. With a tearful voice said sorry. Then paused for a moment, stammering and continuing, really sorry we didn't mean to bring the male bear to find you. Both little bears were too guilty to lift their heads to look at Shijia, only daring to whimper softly in apology. Shijia had never thought of blaming them in the first place. He let out a light sigh, said gently, "It's okay. Don't be afraid, I don't blame you." Then rubbed his forehead against the tops of the two little bears' heads. When encountering danger, you didn't choose to give up, but instead struggled to survive. You are very brave. The two little bears lifted their heads, staring blankly at him, tears glistening in their eyes. Night was about to fall again. Shijia sighed. Going hungry today was unavoidable. But before night fell, Shijia found a spot where the soil was neither too soft nor too hard. Using both paws, he started digging a hole. Before the sun had completely set, a hole large enough to accommodate his body had already fully appeared. Then he found some dry branches and grass leaves and stuffed them into the hole. These branches and leaves were still too hard. Far from being as comfortable as the hole he dug in the forest, he poked his head out of the hole 10 times, wanting to call out to the two little bears, but found that the two little bears were still tightly hugging each other, gazing at him from afar. Forget it, to these two little bears, he probably still counts as a strange bear. He had already dug so many holes, probably didn't need to use the little bears for warmth anymore. As for those two little ones, he knew polar bears were quite cold resistant. However, when night fell, the cold wind poured in. Shijie slept extremely restlessly. In his daze, it seemed something blocked the entrance of the hole. But only for a brief moment. Shijie's body, which had just relaxed, instantly stiffened again. But soon, two warm things suddenly snuggled up beside his body, furry, pressing tightly against him. Heat continuously transferred to him. Something began licking the wound on his ear. Shijie twitched his ears. His tightly curled up bare paws gradually opened, holding the two little furry balls in his embrace. Finally able to sink into dreamland, they slept for 2 days straight. Shijie slowly sat up. His bare paw patted his face. Looking at the sun that had just risen outside, he couldn't help but marvel at how good a bear's sleep quality is. The two white furballs were still sound asleep. Shijie patted both furballs on the head. Perhaps didn't grasp the right amount of force. He was just about to pat a second time, when the little bear was already startled awake. Two white furballs puffed up and jumped, looking around in panic and uncertainty. Shijie gave two mischievous laughs behind them, then lay down on his body, stretched out his neck, and blew a sudden puff of air behind the two little bears. The little bears let out a strange cry of fright and hugged each other. Shijie was amused, leaned back and sat against the cave wall, claws holding his stomach as he laughed heartily. Only then did the two little bears realize what happened. Huddled in the corner, looking at him timidly, in their little eyes, was nothing but accusation for his behavior. Shijie laughed enough, then finally stopped, looked at the sky outside. It's good weather for finding food. Shijie crawled out of the cave entrance, skinned left and right once, chose a direction, and walked straight out. The two little bears in the cave struggled to crawl out, and followed far behind Shijie. A beautiful day also brought beautiful luck. Shijie saw a sparkling expanse of water in the distance, cheered inwardly, using all four limbs, sprinted wildly towards the direction of the reflected light. The two little bears behind didn't understand why, but also sprinted wildly following Shijie. But upon reaching the lakeside, Shijie discovered it was a saltwater lake, meaning it connected to the sea. And also they were standing on a glacier. No land means no plants, not to mention wild berries. They can't even eat grass. Shijie lay by the lakeside, his head resting on his two front paws, gazing melancholically at the blue lake water before him. The two little bears imitated him. They also lay by the lakeside, hanging their heads to look into the lake. Caesar sat on a high snowy slope opposite the lake, watching the one big and two small figures lying by the lake below. His ears twitched twice. Last time he saw this mother bear, he had wondered why she was protecting those two little cubs. Now it seemed she intended to adopt these two little cubs. He had seen many bears that killed cubs, but a bear that adopted cubs not her own. This was Caesar's first time seeing such a thing. Shijie, bored, swept another glance over the lake water. In his peripheral vision, something seemed to move. His yawn halted mid-action. Then he suddenly rose, bringing his head close to the lake surface. The two little bears beside him were startled, just about to jump up, when Shijie pressed them in place with a paw. He examined the lake water carefully, again and again, finally confirming there were fish in this lake, and quite a lot of them. Delight rose in Shijie's heart. He began to walk slowly around the lake's edge, paws placed gently on the snow. The two little bears, intimidated by his posture, dared not move, sitting obediently in place. Shijie finally made his way to the front of the fish. He held his breath, then stretched out like lightning. With a slap of water, the three bears reflected on the lake's surface instantly turned into faint shadows. Although it wasn't clear what Shijie was doing, his series of actions were fierce as a tiger. Not just the two little bears. Even Caesar on the opposite snow slope couldn't help it. Standing up, three pairs of eyes fixed on him in unison. Shijie's paw was still trembling in the water. After a long silence, without changing his expression, he pulled the soaked paw out of the water, looked up at the sky with calm composure, as if nothing had just happened. Only, the wet paw seemed to be hidden a little behind him. The two little bears showed confusion in their eyes. In the end, they just thought he had been playing in the water and lay back down on the snow. Caesar on the snow slope, however, understood. He just wanted to catch a fish. Looking at the round-faced bear sitting by the lake full of embar, a cement, its round ears twitching uncomfortably, Caesar snorted with laughter and sat back down. There were indeed fish in the lake. In winter, some polar bears can't endure hunger. They smash open the lake surface and dive in to catch them. But he had never seen a bear standing by the river, trying to scoop up a fish just by sticking its paw in. It seemed he had overestimated this round-faced bear. Quite bold, but basically zero life experience. Caesar guessed his mother might not have taught him with care how to survive in the Arctic. Or perhaps he might have slacked off while learning. Shishiya's embarrassment lasted less than 2 minutes before disappearing. He soon regained his spirits and waited for the next opportunity. He slowly circled the lake. Soon he found another fish resting by the lakeside. Just like before. Stealthily, a lightning-fast swipe of the paw. Unsurprisingly, he failed again. Several attempts in a row, not a single success. This time, even the two little bears could tell what Shijiya was doing. They both looked at him with complicated expressions in their eyes. 2 hours passed in a flash. Shijiya kept trying like this. Caesar on the snowy slope went from watching with keen interest at first to finally lying bored on the snow. The round-faced bear's patience is commendable. It's just that not being very bright aside. He used to be quite skilled at catching fish. Now, the speed of his paw strike is already enough to slap the fish out of the water. So, what other factors could be causing his hunting failures? Just then, Caesar lay lazily on the snowy slope, watching as the round-faced bear below suddenly stopped moving, just sitting dazedly by the lake, wondering if he was finally about to give up. However, such a thought had barely formed when he saw the round-faced bear below suddenly lower his head and press the tip of his nose against the water's surface. Caesar narrowed his eyes, watching it occasionally twitch its nose twice, sometimes stopping completely still. After a while, it quietly lifted its paw and moved 2 steps to the side. It looked somewhat comical. Caesar's interest, which had almost completely vanished, was piqued once again. Sitting on the snow slope, concentrating intently, staring at him. 2 minutes passed. Shijiya, who had been patiently waiting, suddenly struck with his paw. With a splash, who would have thought a bluish blackfish was slapped out of the water and landed by the lakeside? The two little bears nearby were shocked. The look in their eyes when they looked at Shijiya was tinged with a thick layer of admiration. Even Caesar was very surprised. He also didn't understand how Shijiya had managed to do it. And Shijiya just sat there by the lake, puffed out his chest and raised his head, freely enjoying the admiring gazes of the two little bears. The round ears on top of his head smugly twitched twice. Caesar sat on the snow slope, being this patient for the first time. Now even he couldn't help but marvel at this round-faced bear's learning ability. As evening approached, the busy bear master finally ended his day of hunting. Now the entire edge of the lake was scattered with fish, big and small, adding up to more than 30. The two little bears followed behind him. Surprisingly, hadn't eaten a single fish. They were waiting to eat together with him. Thinking this, he began gathering those scattered fish. The two little bears hesitated for a moment, watching the movements under the stone. It ran out and tentatively picked up one of the fish, then nervously looked toward Shijiya. Only after confirming he had no reaction did it seem to let out a sigh of relief. Following his lead, it helped gather the fish together. Soon, they were piled into a heap. Shijiya sat before the pile of fish, picked out the largest one from the pile and took a bite. Arctic fish looked no different from the fish in the forest. Even the fat content was less than that of migrating salmon. The two little bears did not come forward to share this dinner. They just sat obediently behind Shishiya's rear. The sound of them swallowing saliva was incessant. Shijiya was busy enjoying the feast. At first, he didn't pay attention to them, and even found it strange in his heart. Aren't these two little furballs hungry? Only after devouring a whole fish in one meal did he hear the little male bear's faint voice, "Sister, can I go eat the leftover fish bones now?" A brief silence followed before the bear sister's hesitant voice sounded. "Wait a bit longer, wait until he's full. We'll ask if he can share the leftovers with us." Even though the little male bear was unbearably hungry, he still hesitantly said okay. "But is he willing to share with us?" The bear sister's voice was also hesitant. "He should be willing, right? He's a very good bear." Hearing the two little furballs' words, Shijiya didn't know whether to laugh or cry, finally realizing he had overthought things. Waiting for others to eat together is a basic social etiquette in the human world. In the bear world, all these fish are his prey. To touch another bear's catch without permission is a provocation to that bear. Shijia looked back at the two little bears, thinking they were about to be driven away. They quickly scrambled up on their own and ran a few steps into the distance, then sat down, lowering their bodies. Their little ears drooped down too. Their two pairs of beady eyes were so hungry they were practically glowing green. Yet they still looked at him pitifully, as if begging him not to chase them away. Shijia sighed inwardly. In the end, his heart softened. Come over to me. As soon as the words were spoken, the two little bears instantly sat up straight, seeming unable to believe what they had just heard. Confirming they hadn't misheard, they hurriedly stood up and took 2 steps forward, but quickly stopped again, looking tentatively at Shijia, till they were sure he hadn't changed his mind. Only then did they scurry over with little pattering steps. Shijia waited for the two little bears to feast heartily, but suddenly felt warmth at his feet. Only then did he realize the two little things hadn't gone for the fish at all. They had just run to his side and pressed themselves tightly against him. The little male bear even rubbed his little head against Shishia's paw, again and again, his little ears twitching up and down, looking very happy. Shijia felt his bear persona was about to become unsustainable. He hurriedly dug out 2 large ones from the pile of fish, cleared his throat, and spoke succinctly. The two little bears' eyes instantly lit up. Their tiny, beady eyes filled with disbelief. Shijia couldn't help but raise his head a little, extended his paw and pushed the 2 fish a bit further forward, appearing very aloof and cold. The 2 little bears cheered and pounced on the fish before them, their little paws holding down the fish, devouring them in big mouthfuls. Caesar watched the 3 bears gathered below, sharing the delicious food, putting aside the strange appearance of the round-faced bear. Together, they really did resemble an ordinary polar bear mother. With her cubs, bears have a huge appetite. In no time, the towering pile of fish had already been devoured by 3 bears. Shijia knew they weren't full, because he wasn't full either. But he didn't regret giving the fish to the 2 little bears. Tom Bear sat beside Shijia and said with a very solemn tone, "Thank you." The 2 little bears now trusted Shijia completely, looking at him with eyes that were affectionate and dependent. Shijia lazily lay on the snowy ground, watching the 2 little bears. Suddenly, he thought of something, and a hint of a mischievous smile appeared in his eyes. Soon, by the evening ice lake, Shijia lay comfortably in the snow, directing the 2 little bears beside him to work. Harder, step a bit to the left. Yes, right there, the 2 little bears stood straight on either side of him, stepping diligently on Shishia's body. Shijia was now comfortable, humming and groaning with his eyes closed. His fish was indeed not eaten for free. Now his cold bear den was practically secured. Hearing the 2 little bears start to pant heavily, he felt it was about enough, and told them to stop. Bear sister placed her furry little paw on Shishia's paw. "We can help you with other things too. We'll do anything we can." The little male bear also sat beside his sister, with a very earnest expression. Shijia looked at the sunset glow on the horizon, and a certain string in his heart finally loosened. Shijia struggled for a moment before sitting up. "What are your names?" The 2 little bears were stunned for a moment. Then they realized something. Their breathing became somewhat heavy, but they were afraid they had guessed wrong. They looked at Shijia with longing and trepidation, trying hard to suppress the excitement in their hearts. The older sister bear was the first to answer. "I'm called Bai. My younger brother is called Bai." Then Shijia spoke again. "Do you want to follow me?" Finally hearing these words, the 2 little bears felt settled in their hearts. They glanced at each other, their eyes filled with joy. However, Shijia hadn't finished speaking, yet the hearts of the 2 little bears instantly tightened again. "If you live with me, you will have to help with many things. Under these conditions, are you still willing?" Shijia thought the 2 little furballs would still hesitate for a moment. Unexpectedly, the 2 little bears instantly agreed wholeheartedly. Shijia was satisfied. Indeed, she was still that cold-hearted woman from before. No one could get a free lunch from her, not even cute little bears. She snickered heavily in her heart, while raising a bear paw. "Then it's a deal." And so, 1 large and 2 small, 3 bears, made a solemn pact by the lake on the snowy plain. The motherless little bears had found a new support. As night fell, Shijia took the 2 little bears, and casually found a place sheltered from the wind, dug a shallow pit, just made do and slept like that. Caesar stood in the distance watching them, looking at the round-faced bear. so completely unguarded, holding the two little bears in his arms, his soft belly and throat all exposed to them. Couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Even if they are little bears, they would have been weaned long ago now. Their teeth are all grown in too. He's not afraid at all. And those two little bears, also snuggling up so trustingly, to a strange bear they've only known for a few days. In a certain way of looking at it, these three bears really do look like a family. Caesar found a spot nearby that was out of the wind, using the howling cold wind to mask his scent. Lay down right there, heavily closed his eyes. The next day Shijia got up especially early. He wanted to dig a comfortable cave, so eagerly took the two little bears to start surveying the terrain. It needed to be both out of the wind and hidden. Most importantly, it had to be relatively close to that lake. Although the two little bears didn't know what use finding this was, but staying by Shishia's side and being able to keep watch, the little ones were very excited, following Shijia all the way, chasing and playing around his feet. From time to time they would come over and rub against Shijia. After a rub, feeling happy, trekking over mountains and through rivers with the two little cubs, actually managed to search all over the area within about 2 miles around the lake, completely unaware that a male bear was following behind them, watching their every move with great interest. After some effort, Shijia finally selected a satisfactory spot. Then, at his command, the two little furballs took the lead in attacking, frantically clawing at the spot he indicated. Shijia sat behind, cheering and shouting that Da Bai was digging the fastest. Upon hearing this, Xiao Bai's eyes flashed with defiance, immediately speeding up. His little paws were swinging so fast they almost left after images. This time, his efforts weren't overlooked. It seemed Xiao Bai was actually a bit faster. So Da Bai, not to be outdone either, stuck his butt out and buried his head, running with all his might. To simple-minded little bears, played right into the paws of the cunning big bear. In no time, they dug through the snow layer, revealing the frozen soil beneath. Shijia sat leisurely to the side and called a stop before the two little bears hurt their paws. He nudged the two little bears aside with his nose, basking in the admiring gazes of the two little bears. Shishia's round, sturdy body swayed from side to side. His thick paws flew up and down until he dug out a deep hole. Then, amidst the amazed sounds of the two little bears, he wiped his bare claws in the snow, calmly and effortlessly, wiping away the mud from his claws and fur, concealing his merit and fame. This also gave Caesar, who had witnessed the entire process from afar, a new impression of him. The bear in the Arctic most skilled at digging holes. Shijia burrowed into the hole she had dug, took a deep breath. The scent of soil mingled with the smells of snow and wind, drifted into her nostrils. Two little bear cubs were rolling around inside the hole. Their white fur quickly became coated in dusty gray. Shishia's eye twitched at the sight. She picked up both cubs by the scruff, carried them out of the hole, and tossed them into the snow. She scooped up a pawful of snow and vigorously scrubbed it over the two little ones, scrubbing until the cubs squealed and yelped, till the multi-grain flour rolls turned back into white steamed buns. Only then did Shijia stop. The inside of the hole was a mess of mud. Shijia made a quick decision. She took the two cubs to gather dry branches and grass. She lined the bottom of the hole anew with soft, dry leaves. This would both keep them warm and prevent their fur from getting dirty. Shijia lay down in the hole and rolled over a couple of times. She gave the hole's comfort level the highest score. Only then did she reluctantly crawl out. She led the cubs toward the direction of the lake. They still had to figure out how to fill their bellies before the temperature plummeted. Not long after they left, Caesar stood up and walked toward the spot where the hole had just been dug. He stood at the entrance, stuck his head inside to take a look. The interior of the hole was much more spacious than the entrance. The entire hole was narrow at the top and wide at the bottom. The bottom was lined with a thick layer of dry grass and leaves. It did indeed look like a good place to sleep. Caesar leaned his head in a bit further, tentatively stretched out a paw and stepped inside to test it. The furry bear paw swung twice in the air, then stretched downward with effort. Couldn't reach the bottom? Caesar retracted his paw without changing expression, recalling how the round-faced bear had squeezed into the hole. He turned his body around, preparing to enter the whole hind legs first. It was dug by Ishida according to his own size. For a behemoth like Caesar, it was somewhat small. He braced one hind leg against the whole wall. Halfway down, he felt himself getting stuck. Just as he was about to climb back out, both hind legs simultaneously lost their footing. His center of gravity dropped, and the entire bear just slid into the hole. Fortunately, the soft, dry leaves inside the hole cushioned the impact of the fall. Caesar landed on them not only completely unharmed, but also found it quite comfortable. Some faint little sounds suddenly came from overhead. He was just about to look up, when the next second his head was hit twice by crumbling dirt clods. Caesar fell silent for a moment, looked up. The originally carefully shaped, perfectly regular hole entrance had now, unable to bear the weight, collapsed by half. And so, this male polar bear, for the first time in his life, felt a strange sense of guilt welling up in his heart. Caesar raised his paws and stood up straight, relying on his considerably greater height compared to Ishida. He tried to pat the dirt back up. Who knew he couldn't gauge the force? His paw had only just touched the edge of the hole, when with a crash, the already precarious cave entrance collapsed another half. Now Caesar was completely subdued. He gathered the fallen soil and somewhat concealed it under the withered leaves. Then he raised his paw. Thinking of the cave entrance's original appearance, he pawed at it a couple of times. Gazing at the now larger cave entrance, Caesar rather smugly licked his paw, feeling it was no different from the original entrance. He just didn't know if, when he tried to climb out later, this fragile entrance would collapse again. The soft, withered leaves beneath his bottom continuously transmitted a sense of peace and warmth, chasing away Caesar's drowsiness as it gradually rose. Caesar simply lay down directly, lying in the hole he had painstakingly dug under the rock, and fell fast asleep. Night fell. The bear master, tired from a day's work, returned with 2 cubs, each bear holding a fish in its mouth, walking with light steps on the way back to the cave. Thinking of the warm and comfortable cave dug in the morning, not only could they enjoy delicious fish inside, but also get a good night's sleep. Gourmet, along with the 2 cubs, quickened their pace considerably. But upon reaching the front of the cave under the rock, they faintly heard heavy, muffled panting coming from inside. This brown bear brought his polar bear cubs home, just about to have dinner at the cave entrance, but discovered heavy panting sounds coming from the cave. It was actually a male bear inside, fast asleep. The 2 cubs were already trembling with fear. The fish that was held in the mouth also scattered to the side. It was that male bear from last time, Yanwenchi. There wasn't much surprise. Ever since catching fish yesterday, he had often felt there was something around him. He just hadn't been able to find any trace. Now it seemed it was an old acquaintance, his carefully prepared den, which he hadn't even had time to properly enjoy. And this stinking bear was already sleeping soundly inside. A surge of anger welled up in Shishiya's heart. His front paws impatiently scraped out several deep marks. The 2 bear cubs silently shrank their heads back. Shishiya looked at the cave entrance that had already collapsed once, and an idea immediately sprang to mind. His anger then gradually subsided, but a hint of mischief glinted in his eyes. He held his breath and walked near the cave entrance. The snoring sound coming from inside also abruptly stopped at that moment. Shishiya raised his bare paw high, and with a fierce pounce he slammed it heavily toward the cave entrance. At the same time, a drowsy white head emerged from the cave entrance, not expecting the other to suddenly stick its head out. It was too late to retract his claw. The mischievous smile in Shishiya's eyes instantly vanished, replaced by panic. The male bear's face magnified infinitely in his vision. Caesar had just stuck his head out of the cave. When he saw the round-faced bear standing at the entrance, he only had time to see the alarm in his eyes, before a furry sensation came crashing down upon him. He came down and wrapped himself in a tight embrace. Things had come to this. Shishiya made a decisive move, taking advantage of the male bear not yet reacting. He was the first to raise his paw and strike. The 2 bear cubs watched as Shishiya knocked the male bear back into the cave. His paws immediately slammed toward the cave entrance. The fragile cave entrance collapsed once again. Blood mixed with dirt pattered down. Jiazi seized the chance to escape with the 2 cubs. By the time Caesar crawled out of the cave, covered in dust, the round-faced bear and the 2 cubs' traces were already long gone. Caesar shook himself, dusting off the dirt on his body. His gaze fell on the fish they had dropped while fleeing. Then he slowly walked over, and without any courtesy began to enjoy this unexpected feast. After finishing the fish, Caesar licked his paws clean, then lay in the snow, drowsy for a while. Only then did he get up. His nose tip lightly touched the air. Then he raised a paw and slowly headed in one direction. Shishiya fled with the 2 bear cubs. He could only find a new place to settle. This time he was much more alert. His sense of smell was completely incomparable to a polar bear's keenness. But it didn't matter. Weren't the 2 little furballs also polar bears? So he began to train the 2 cubs' olfactory habits. For 2 days straight, The scent of that male polar bear did not appear again. Only then did he slightly let his guard down. Life still had to go on. He rallied his forces. With the two little bears, they dug another cave, just like before. Carefully selected soft dead branches and leaves to spread inside the cave. Adjusted the shape of the cave entrance. After sleeping soundly in the cave with the two little bears, only then did they leave the cave to search for food. But when they returned from hunting, they saw the male bear snoring soundly in the cave again. Having learned from the previous incident, Shijie no longer had the intention to bury the male bear alive like last time. Standing in the distance, gritting her teeth and glaring at the cave entrance. After a while, forcing down the anger in her heart, she left with the two little bears, dejected and crestfallen. Unaware that Caesar inside the cave, after having slept his fill, once again relied on his extraordinary sense of smell, and followed behind them. Next, no matter where Shijie took the two cubs to dig a den, when they felt they had to go out to search for food after a few days, it was inevitable that after setting out to hunt with peace of mind, upon returning, they would find a shameless male bear inside the den. Several times in a row, Shijie no longer had the heart to carefully choose a location, meticulously dig, and meticulously decorate the den like before. If it weren't for the fact that he really couldn't stand the den, he even wanted to sleep right there with the two cubs. When, for the last time, he discovered that in the haphazardly dug den, there came the familiar snoring sound. The last thread of sanity in Shijie's mind completely snapped. The sounds coming from the den were intermittent, followed by little tremolos and heavy snores, each one declaring just how beautifully the drunk bear in the den was sleeping now. These past few days, he had been taking the cubs to endure wind and dew every day, barely managing to get through, only to have the den usurped in the end, forced to sleep in the cold wind, while the stupid bear inside the den, by occupying another's nest, slept until waking naturally every day. Shijie took a deep breath, wanting to forcibly suppress his anger. After a brief few seconds, a blast of scorching air shot from his nostrils. Seaweed walked toward the den entrance. Calmness had failed. The giant white bear sleeping soundly in the den. Its soft paw pads curled slightly. Its tightly shut eyes cracked open a tiny slit. From within, a flash of cold, fierce gaze emerged. But this gaze is filled with all that is unkind. The emotion quickly dissipated, replaced by a moment of stunned bewilderment and surprise. In the past, that round-faced fellow would have turned and run. Lately, he had been chasing after the round-faced bear. Although the holes he dug were indeed very suitable for sleeping, still, he was almost getting bored with it. This time, unexpectedly, he actually took the initiative to come closer. Caesar simply rolled over onto his back and went back to sleeping in the hole. Even his breathing became slightly quicker from excitement. At that moment, the footsteps stopped at the entrance of the hole. Caesar, while putting on an act, wondered what the round-faced bear would do next. Before, collapse the hole's entrance to bury him. Still going to be more radical. Directly burrow into the hole and tear into each other with him. Caesar guessed it might be the second one. Round-faced bear seems to have been forcibly suppressing something all along. And now he has driven him to the point of losing all reason. Perhaps soon, he will be able to see what he wants to see on this bear. Caesar feels somewhat pleased inside. The warlike nature makes it so that even without wanting to kill the other, he still finds it hard to conceal the excitement of wanting to fight. However, he waited in the hole for a long time, and no movement came from the entrance. That bear is now guarding the entrance, but hasn't done anything. Caesar looked up. Apart from the already darkened sky, there was nothing else left. That long-awaited excitement of having one's wish fulfilled came to an abrupt halt. Caesar looked up at the sky again. He decided not to wait any longer, and prepared to climb out of the hole to investigate. Just as he poked his head out to see what was going on, a chubby, round paw came swatting right at his face, followed by a second, a third, 10 strikes, swinging fiercely towards his pale face. Caesar was completely stunned by the blows. Coming to his senses, he quickly protected his snout, only to find the other party starting to attack his entire head. The hole greatly restricted Caesar's movements, making it impossible for him to fight back. Caesar had intended to find a gap to climb out, but finally discovered to his surprise that this bear's paw-swiping speed was unprecedentedly fast. The movements looked just like how he had seen it digging holes before. A few days ago, he had even joked about how well this bear dug holes. Now he was personally experiencing it, although the damage wasn't great. It still forced Caesar to retreat back into the hole. Seeing him shrink back, Shijie had no intention of chasing into the hole either. He hadn't completely lost his mind. So Shijia guarded the entrance, taking advantage of the terrain. Whenever the male bear poked his head out, he would unleash a barrage of strikes on the pale bear head, watching the other party have to retreat back into the hole again. Shishia's eyes filled with a ferocious smile. His honest bear face was full of the pleasure of vengeance achieved. This exhilarating game of whack-a-bear lasted until late into the night. Two little bears wanted to come over and warm it up, but were sternly refused by it. They could only hide in the distance, watching with worry. Here, one inside and one outside. The two bears had reached a stalemate. Shijia, braving the cold wind, had no intention of letting Caesar off. And Caesar had long lost his earlier ease and delight, growing increasingly restless inside the narrow cave entrance. Most polar bears have a rather lazy disposition. He had never seen a bear persist for so long. Caesar let out an impatient snort from his throat, wondering when he would give up. For some reason, he suddenly remembered spying on the round-faced plate bear, catching fish back then. It seemed to have little patience. Its movements hurried and frantic, yet it actually persisted for a long time, not stopping until it caught the fish. Caesar's impatient fidgeting stopped. He suddenly realized this was a thoroughly stubborn bear through and through. By now, Shishia's paws were aching from the cold. He had to lift his foot and use his leg, wrapped in thick fur, to touch the snow-covered ground for some warmth. The beast's impatient grunts had stopped at some point without notice. Shijia suspected that the male bear, unable to get out, might have simply laid down and gone back to sleep in the cave. Thinking of this, Shishia's sense of vengeful satisfaction instantly vanished, so he decided to poke his head out to see what was going on. But in the pitch black, he couldn't see a thing. Never mind, might as well just carry out the burial plan then. However, just as he was about to turn back, a sudden flash of white light appeared before his eyes. Shijia was startled. Before he could react, he felt something crash into his chest. The next second, his body lost its balance, and he fell straight down. Immediately after, his upper body was suddenly enveloped by a thick layer of warmth. What then came into view was a layer of white fur tinged with moonlight. Only then did Shijia realize he was being hugged by that male bear. Instantly, his scalp went numb. Being in the embrace of such an apex predator was utterly terrifying. Without a second thought, he began to struggle. Caesar held the round-faced bear tightly. He didn't immediately bite, but he absolutely wouldn't loosen his grip either. Unable to break free, Shijia could only retreat backward, hoping to escape the male bear's restraint this way. However, the male bear was like a stubborn plaster, impossible to peel off. His mouth was right near his neck, so he didn't dare to bite down recklessly. Although he didn't know why the other wasn't tearing into him, he knew that if he were to attack first, the other might just sink its teeth into his neck. As his mind raced with chaotic thoughts, the male bear holding him firmly suddenly moved. Shishia's body was being dragged into the cave by the male bear. He was horrified in his heart. This was to drag him into the cave to eat him. If dragged into the cave, there would be no chance at all. Shishia's heart sank. He struggled backward desperately. His nails scraped to deep marks on the ground. The two bears began to wrestle against each other. Shijia used all his strength to pull back. Finally, there was initial success. He felt a surge of joy in his heart, ready to make further efforts to break free from the male bear's restraint. However, what he didn't expect was the tremendous force that had been pulling against him suddenly vanished into thin air. The next second, his furry body fell backward, landing on his back, dizzy and disoriented. After shaking his head, a huge white bear paw suddenly stepped down in front of his eyes. The male bear, originally trapped in the cave, now stood before him. He and this bear were once again on equal footing. What awaited them was a fight to the death. Whoever won would survive. Caesar stood before the round-faced bear. This was the closest they had been since their last fight. He could clearly see the emotions in the other's eyes. Unsurprisingly, he saw ferocity, confusion and fear, self-doubt, and finally a despair that seemed to give up struggling. Such a look he had seen in the eyes of too many polar bears. But before this bear, he always felt something was off. He hasn't seen his final struggle yet. Caesar did not attack first. He just bared his fangs. His heavy bear paw stepped forward. An intense aura pressed down on the bear on the ground. A low bear roar spilled from his throat. Under the thick threat, Caesar was satisfied, looking at the round-faced bear in front of him. His eyes suddenly turned sharp. After a roar full of might, he raised his paw and swatted at him. Caesar and Shijia were instantly locked in a fight. Shijia, learning from the previous lesson, did not bite Caesar's front paw first this time. Instead, he went straight for Caesar's face. Caesar turned his head to avoid it and stood up, wanting to use his size advantage to pin Shijia down like before. Unfortunately, Shijia wouldn't give him that chance again. He charged fiercely at Caesar first. Caesar momentarily lost his balance and had to shift his body and lower his front paws. Shijia, failing with one strike, wanted to turn around and charge again. But unexpectedly, he stepped on empty air and rolled a distance through the pool of blood. Caesar seized the chance to readjust his posture, looking at his body that had just stopped rolling. His ears twitched twice. He opened his mouth, making a huffing sound. He looked very pleased. Damn male bear. He actually dares to laugh at him. Shishia's face instantly darkened. Logically speaking, the distance now has already widened. He should take this opportunity to escape. But seeing the two little bears hiding on the snow slope, if he leaves now, the chance of the two little bears surviving is 0. In the end, Shijia still didn't choose to turn and leave. He had already adopted the two little bears. Since he adopted them, he must make every effort, at least to let them safely pass through their infancy and live independently in the Arctic. Moreover, he had a suspicion in his heart that needed to be confirmed. The next second, the white-furred bear tinged with a circle of brown, charged towards Caesar, sweeping away the previous leg injury from being deceived. Nor did he lose his fighting spirit from falling down the snow slope. Instead, he became even more combative. Seeing this scene, Caesar was actually stunned. This image was deeply engraved in his eyes. Something in his chest seemed to beat violently twice. The furry giant furball rushed before his eyes in the blink of an eye. Caesar stared straight, actually didn't react in time, and just collided head-on like that. Caesar was somewhat overwhelmed, directly knocked to the ground. Now, he no longer had the previous playful and dismissive thoughts. Shijia went straight for Caesar's throat to bite. Caesar reacted quickly, pushed him hard with his claws. Shijia didn't succeed, but the bear's mouth just barely bit onto the claw Caesar used to block him. It was truly a scene replay. Shijia went straight for Caesar's paw with a deadly bite. Caesar hurt so much that he grimaced in pain. Anger flared up in his heart instantly. Using his size advantage, he rolled to the side and directly pressed the 10 down on the ground. Caesar thought the round-faced bear would let go like this, but he clearly underestimated this female bear's desire for revenge. This female bear didn't seem afraid at all. While biting down hard on his paw, her eyes were terrifyingly bright, just staring straight at him. Caesar met the female bear's eyes. Her sharp gaze shot directly into his eyes. It was hard to imagine this was the look of a bear already at a disadvantage. In the fight, Caesar couldn't look away, only feeling something in his chest beat violently twice more. Seeing there was no way to force him to compromise, Caesar tried twice to free his paw. Without success, he lowered his head and directly bit the round ear of Shijia. It was the same ear as before. Pain surged. Shijia released his grip. Caesar's paw was finally free. This time, he confirmed this female bear's weakness was in the ear. As long as he bit the ear, the round-faced bear's stubbornness would immediately disappear. Caesar was satisfied. He lifted a front paw, pressed it onto Shishia's furry belly, lowered his head and let out a bear roar at Shijia. It was a show of force and intimidation. Now he felt this bear had shown him everything he had. His courage had been broken by him. He could no longer resist him like before. Caesar was satisfied with this outcome. But strangely, he didn't really feel happy inside. Instead, there was a slight regret. However, just as he lowered his head, a sudden whooshing sound by his ear, followed immediately by a slap sound. A round bear paw landed squarely on Caesar's bare face. This strong male bear was completely stunned on the spot. He simply couldn't believe why. Hadn't he already won this fight? Caesar guessed many things, only feeling this female bear had lost her mind and was actively seeking death. But on the contrary, at this moment Shijia was terrifyingly calm, because his conjecture was confirmed. This strange male bear seemed to have no intention of killing him at all, seemed only keen on making him compromise to him. When Shijia worked as an animal photographer, he came into contact with many fierce carnivores. Animal psychology is sometimes more like that of a child. Just like when a cheetah sees a newborn gazelle, there are occasional moments when it doesn't immediately go for the kill. Shijia speculated that now this male bear was in such a state. Moreover, he was a brown bear, which is quite different from a normal polar bear. This undoubtedly made him more interesting. That's why he acted like a mischievous child, continuously burrowing into the hole he dug. For fun, but also probably to provoke him. This bear, like some animals he had encountered before, was just being occasionally foolish. Shijie now looked at Caesar with eyes that held a touch of benevolence. Hidden deep within was a layer of thoughtful cunning. If asked what humans are best at, it would undoubtedly be making reasonable use of situations and then pushing their luck. In the end, Shijie and Caesar made an agreement. Following was allowed, but he could not approach his cub. As the weather grew hotter, summer was about to arrive. Shijie learned from Caesar's mouth that when summer came, the surrounding ice would all melt away. By then, this lake would disappear and be left behind. Don't even talk about filling one's stomach. Maintaining the body's basic needs is impossible. And before all the ice floes melt and drift away, polar bears will board the ice floes, relying on hunting seals on the ice to get through the summer. But as a brown bear, Shijie, swimming is simply not his strong suit. Shijie wanted to say he's not a polar bear, but considering he's new here, to avoid trouble, he ultimately swallowed those words. His attitude is very firm. I am not getting on the ice floe. Caesar, learning that Shijie intends to stay on the island, immediately became anxious. If you don't get on the ice floe, how will you survive on the island in the summer? You even have those two cubs with you. Shijie didn't speak, stubbornly lowering his head. His attitude expressed very clearly. Caesar cursed inwardly. What a stubborn bear, he thought for a moment, and decided to use a more subtle way to trick Shijie into following him onto the ice floe. You've never eaten seal. That's why you think fish is good. How about this? I'll go catch a seal. You wait here for me to finish eating. You will definitely change your mind. Shijie was dumbfounded. He just wanted to say he doesn't actually like fish that much. But Caesar had already turned and trotted away. The next day, Caesar's brother Locke sat on the snow, leisurely grooming his fur. He was lucky today. Caught a seal. And had just enjoyed a satisfying meal. Feeling like I haven't had enough yet. In the blink of an eye, I saw Caesar dragging half a seal forward. My eyes immediately lit up. Caesar, I'm here. Where have you been these past 2 days? I was just about to go over and sneak a couple more bites. But then I realized Caesar didn't hear his call at all. Dragging the seal, he ran toward the snowy mountain without even looking back. Locke immediately felt wronged. But what followed was even more curiosity. Caesar usually stays mostly in the floating ice area. In previous years at this time, he would have already been staying on the floating ice for a long time, missing the floating ice drifting away and being left on the island. But now he's actually running toward the snowy mountain. Locke trotted along, following Caesar from a distance. On the other side, Shijie took advantage of Caesar's absence and took the two cubs to learn how to swim. Although she herself is only half-skilled, at least she doesn't sink in the lake, barely able to teach the two little furballs. When Caesar came back with that half a seal in his mouth, the two cubs were still by Shijie's side, enjoying a rare moment of family bonding. Seeing the male bear return, they were immediately scared and obediently returned to their hiding place. Shijie saw him. Her eyes immediately showed reluctance. She thought Caesar wasn't planning to come back anymore. But Caesar pretended not to see her expression, dragging the seal meat and placing it in front of Shijie. Were you waiting for me by the lake yesterday? Hearing this, Shijie was somewhat speechless. One can easily guess that it must be impossible. Caesar had anticipated this. Still, he felt somewhat disappointed. But he couldn't dwell on these feelings. He lowered his head and nudged the seal meat further under Shijie. You eat this. Shijie was somewhat reluctant. But in the end, he complied as Caesar wished. Caesar watched the round-faced bear, Yuanbin, whose leisurely chewing suddenly paused. Then it began to speed up. His eyes seemed to sparkle. Instantly, Caesar felt reassured. How is it? The taste isn't bad, right? Caesar pushed the meat forward again. Eat more. Shijie was delighted by this. As for eating what Caesar had caught, he felt no embarrassment at all. Caesar had already eaten so many of his fish. Wasn't it only fair that he got to eat a little in return? It's just that the two little furballs were still growing. Fish alone couldn't sustain them much longer. Shijie's good mood from enjoying the delicious food gradually faded. A trace of worry rose in his heart. He really needed to take the two little furballs onto the floating ice. Caesar sat beside him, watching Shijie eat. At first, seeing him eat heartily, Caesar felt happy along with him. But then he noticed Shijie's chewing slowing down more and more, and a hint of sorrow mixing into his eyes. What's wrong now? Just as he was wondering, he looked up and met two little heads peeking from behind a snowball. It was the bear cubs, unable to resist the smell of seal, peeked out to take a couple of glances. Caesar instantly cursed Mother, thinking Shijia wouldn't really drag back its prey to feed the two little cubs, would it? The male bear's heart instantly became unbalanced, couldn't resist the mischief brewing inside, so it couldn't help but blurt out, "Actually, the taste of little cubs is the same as seal meat. If you like eating it, then just..." Shishia's chewing movement stopped, closed its eyes and took two deep breaths. In the end, still couldn't hold back. Swung a paw right at it. Caesar had anticipated it. But somehow, it didn't dodge. Finally, covering its nose, it let out a howl. Immediately started rolling on the ground, acting up. "I went to find food for you. How could you still hit me? You're too heartless." Shijia got annoyed seeing him like this. Just about to raise a paw and give him a couple more. Suddenly, a hesitant voice came from beside them. Shishia's paw, mid-swing, stopped abruptly, looked up sharply to find that on the hillside, who knows when, another male bear had appeared. It was looking down at them, its face full of shock and hesitation. Shijia immediately assumed an attacking stance, bared its teeth at the unfamiliar male bear. This male bear knew Caesar. It was hard to avoid Caesar revealing its true nature. But just as it was about to turn around and stay alert, looking back, the male bear that had just been acting up on the ground had already gone completely stiff. His limbs were still flailing wildly in a haphazard posture. This was a state Shijia hadn't anticipated. "What's wrong with you?" Only then did Caesar seem to snap out of a dream. But soon, it was as if he had seen something terrifying. He abruptly rolled over and sat up. Yet he dared not look in the direction of the unfamiliar male bear. Instead, he turned his back. Sitting up ramrod straight, Shijia opened his mouth. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Caesar's dry, urgent voice by his ear. "Hurry up and say it. Tell him quickly. He's mistaken. There's no bear here named Caesar." Caesar, in his panic, was clutching at straws. His eyes held a trace of pleading, continuously urging in a low voice, "Hurry up and say it." Shijia lifted his head slightly, cruelly exposing reality. "It's useless. Even if I say there's no bear here named Caesar, he can smell it out." He looked teasingly at the rigid male bear, his eyes mixed with a hint of schadenfreude. At that moment, the male bear on the snow slope called out again, "Caesar." Then he ran forward a couple of steps, stopped abruptly. Using his weight and the soft snow layer, he slid down from the snow slope. Just as he prepared to approach, Shijia was already standing ready for battle. A threatening, low growl forced the unfamiliar male bear to stop, gazing longingly at Caesar's back. Caesar thought Shijia was helping him. His eyes, looking at him, flickered, filled with emotion, as if saying, "I didn't expect you to care about me so much." Shijia couldn't help but roll her eyes. "Don't flatter yourself. If it weren't for the little bear cub, he would have stepped aside long ago." Locke wanted to approach, but pressured by Shijia, he didn't dare to step forward and could only stand in place, stretching his neck, his bobbing nose sniffing hard, double-checking again and again. Although the scent he smelled kept telling him that the male bear with its back turned to him was Caesar, Locke still couldn't believe it. That the bear he just saw rolling and throwing a tantrum on the ground, getting hit and still shoving its face back, was his brother. The male bear's rough sniffing was unusually obvious. Caesar's back straightened more and more. After a while, a mischievous smile suddenly rose in Shishia's eyes. Under Caesar's horrified gaze, she dropped her aggressive stance, then leisurely walked to the side, and said loudly, "Caesar seems to be looking for you." As soon as these words were spoken, Caesar broke down. After the initial shock, Locke also broke down. He ran up to Caesar in an extremely comical posture. "It really is you." Caesar lowered his head and didn't answer him. His butt spun rapidly, soon turning his back to Locke again. As if meeting Shijia for the first time, he looked the round-faced figure up and down. Shijia sat to the side, raising her chin, leisurely enjoying the male bear's astonished gaze. A bear born missing a screw is simply incapable of noticing another bear's intent to reject him. Just like how Locke couldn't understand Caesar's evasive movements. Every time Caesar turned his body, he would follow and run along, eventually ending up right in front of Caesar again, determined to make his brother look him in the eye. The thoroughly annoyed Caesar finally couldn't take it anymore, and roared at his clueless, foolish younger brother. Years of experience reading moods and faces made Locke's legs habitually go weak. His body skillfully flopped to the side, all four limbs up, exposing his white belly. Then his bare head pressed against Caesar's leg. Such a swift method of begging for mercy. Without having practiced it hundreds of times, could never achieve this level of proficiency. In an instant, not only did Caesar fall silent, even Stone, who was nearby, fell silent too. He had overestimated this unfamiliar male bear. He originally thought he could cause Caesar some trouble. Caesar's eye twitched twice, looking at Locke's pathetic appearance. He gritted his teeth and said. Locke rolled on the ground twice, shamelessly clinging. You can't hit me. If you don't hit me, I'll get up, okay? His explosive temper finally couldn't be contained. He went up and used a move of war, stomping his thick bear paw, pressed down twice on Locke's soft belly, then used two claws to haul the bear on the ground to his feet. Locke was so scared he immediately hugged Caesar's paw. If you don't let go, Caesar has plenty of ways to deal with him. He took a bite right at his neck. White fur flew everywhere. The next second, Locke was so scared he let go of his claws. He retreated repeatedly, looking at Caesar with eyes full of terror. Shijia was seeing male bears fight for the first time. To be precise, it was Caesar's one-sided violence. To be honest, it wasn't a pleasant sight. He could tell. Caesar didn't intend to bite this male bear to death. But the bite he just took wasn't light. With the slightest misstep, there was still the possibility of it being fatal. On the other side, Locke was also trembling with fear from Caesar. Caesar was annoyed seeing him like this. Look at what state you're in. Do you really want to be bitten to death? You didn't even put up any resistance. Just waiting to die like that. Locke lowered his head in grievance, muttering softly. You wouldn't really bite me to death. Besides, weren't you just the same earlier? Caesar's pupils sharpened. He raised his voice and said, What did you say? Locke only felt a wave of grievance wash over his heart. His mind went hot. He stopped hiding, shouting towards Caesar, I said you were just the same. I saw it just now. That bear next to you hit you. You didn't fight back either. Not only did you not fight back, you even rolled on the ground. If you can do that, why can't I? Caesar's mind roared. Struck by this bolt from the blue, he froze on the spot. His mind was filled with he saw it. He really saw it. What should I do? Does he really have to kill the bear to silence him? He won't tell anyone what he saw, right? On the other side, Locke's accusations were still continuing. Why are you avoiding me? Do you know how long I've been looking for you? I've been looking for you for so long. And you're actually with another bear. I finally get to see you. Why did you bite me? Shijia sat in place, watching the commotion with great interest. Locke's mouth kept going on and on. Caesar had been seen by him in a state unbecoming of a male bear. He was already ashamed and furious enough to die. Now, hearing him say so much, he simply lost all reason. He sneered, Why should I avoid you? Aren't you clear in your own heart? The bear who was frantically accusing was stunned. His eyes, still glistening with tears, looked blankly at Caesar. With complete indifference, he said to him, Locke, are you an adult bear? You are no longer a child. No longer a cub. You must leave your mother. Leave me and live on your own. You can only rely on yourself, not follow behind me every day, relying on me to protect you. Locke was stunned. He looked at Caesar with a deeply hurt expression, as if he never expected he would say such cold words. Tears welled up as he said, Are you going to abandon me like Mom did too? Caesar irritably turned his head away. First of all, leaving your mother was your own choice. Mom did not abandon you. She was forced by you to leave the snowy region. Secondly, I just happen to be a polar bear born in the same litter as you. I have no obligation to take care of you. So it doesn't even count as abandonment. Saying this is quite hurtful to a bear, Shijia didn't expect that this unfamiliar male bear was actually Caesar's brother. You could clearly feel that the relationship between these two brothers was very close, definitely different from other normal polar bear brothers. But since such harsh words were spoken, this pair of bear brothers will probably be on bad terms for a long time, right? Shijia was just filled with emotion when the next second he saw the male bear named Locke charge towards Caesar. There was no scene of the two bears flying into a rage out of humiliation and fighting to the death as imagined. In his sight, the male bear simply tucked and slid, then tightly hugged Caesar's paw. Locke shoved his head under Caesar's belly and shouted loudly, I don't care. I'm going to cling to you. Otherwise, just bite me to death. Anyway, there's absolutely no way I'll stay away from you. The large polar bear threw a wild tantrum in the snow, his body constantly writhing. In no time, just by rolling in place, he actually ground out a big pit in the ground. Shijia was amazed. Caesar, meanwhile, lowered his head and kept growling, "Let go. Let go," but Locke, who was already crying uncontrollably, turned a deaf ear, just stubbornly hugging his paw. "Unless you bite me to death. Otherwise I won't leave." Such a big commotion. The two little furballs were both attracted, couldn't resist and poked their little heads out again. Caesar really took the feeling of losing face and experienced it to the fullest. Opened his mouth wanting to take a fierce bite, but was wary of the stone statue watching with great interest beside them. Just now when he was lecturing Locke, this round-faced bear's eyes suddenly didn't seem quite right. Not sure what had provoked him again. Caesar finally had no other way. Forcing down his anger, lowered his head and told Locke to stop messing around. Locke knew when to quit while he was ahead. The moment he sensed his brother's attitude had changed, immediately put away his tantrum-throwing posture, sat to the side looking all well-behaved. Quite a large bear, now hunched over, head hanging down, timidly glancing at Caesar out of the corner of his eye. Surprisingly, there wasn't a hint of incongruity. Caesar didn't want to continue losing face. Shot a glance at Locke, said coldly, "Follow me." Locke shrank his head, his eyes filled with reluctance. But finally, under Caesar's gaze radiating coldness, with head hung, he followed step by step straight down, watching the two bears leave one after the other. My gaze fell back on the remaining seal meat by my feet. Locke followed behind Caesar all the way, hearing the sound of his bare paws heavily treading on the snow. The further he walked, the more guilty he felt. Don't know why. His intuition told him it's best not to stray too far from the lakeside. Thinking this, Locke simply plopped down and sat, refusing to move no matter what was said. Facts proved his choice was right. Caesar stood before him, looking down at him from a superior position. Locke felt immense pressure under the gaze from above. His head drooped lower and lower. Finally, he simply lay on the ground, covering his head with his paws. Caesar sneered, "Usually you run quite fast. Why aren't you running this time?" In the past, Locke was best at reading expressions and situations, always managing to leave before Caesar completely erupted. Locke covered his head with his paws and remained silent. Caesar didn't expect to hear his answer anyway. "How did you find this place?" Locke loosened the paws covering his head a bit. His voice was very faint. "I saw you on the floating ice." As he said this, it seemed he remembered something. He rolled over and sat up, complaining, "I called you, but you ignored me. Then I followed behind you. You didn't even smell my scent. So I followed all the way here." Caesar was also taken aback by his words. Following behind him the whole time? Usually, this fool would sneakily follow him and be discovered every couple of steps. Today, he actually followed him all the way. The male bear carefully recalled. He could remember. At that time, his mind was completely focused on finding the stone statue. Caesar was momentarily stunned, somewhat unable to accept it. "I actually wanted to see the round-faced bear earlier for myself." Ignoring the hunting habit of being alert to scents, Locke had no idea what his brother was thinking. His mind was now completely filled with the scene of Caesar being hit and rolling on the ground throwing a tantrum. The last time he saw Caesar in that state was when he was very young, acting spoiled while staying close to his mother. This bear clearly knew he would get hit. After holding back several times but ultimately failing to resist, the male bear chose, while trembling with fear, to shakily expose his brother's shortcomings. "I saw that she-bear slap your face, and you rolling around in the snow." Under Caesar's increasingly icy glare, Locke's voice gradually grew softer, finally shifting from loudly seizing leverage to quietly threatening. "I don't care if you're trying to chase me away. I'll just tell everyone what I saw." Caesar was almost amused with anger. That stupid bear used to have a weak, cowardly personality, timid and had no normal social interactions with other bears at all. If he ever got mixed up with other bears, there was only one possibility. That was other bears were stealing his prey. Now, relying on him backing this stupid bear up. No bear dared to steal this stupid bear's food anymore. Instead, he leveraged his slick, idol-seeking nature to mix in well among the male bears, thriving and flourishing. Made quite a few friends. Now he could even use this to threaten him. Was he a bear who could be threatened by such things? Amusingly, under Caesar's shifting, stormy gaze, Locke felt uneasy, his heart in turmoil, waiting for the final verdict. Until he heard Caesar say through gritted teeth, "Keep your mouth shut. If I hear from any other bear's mouth something I shouldn't be hearing, I'll bite you to death." Locke's eyes flashed with a golden light. Intuition told him he had stumbled upon one of Caesar's secrets unknown to other bears. He began to boldly tease his fierce, close kin. Brother, why were you giving that she-bear food? I've smelled that she-bear's scent. It's the same one I smelled near Kaya's corpse. Have you been with her all this time? Caesar irritably turned his head away. Locke didn't expect him to answer his question anyway. A sly light flashed in his eyes. He pretended to say casually, hey, these days feel like summer. There must be many bears on the drifting ice. Haven't seen you in a long time. When sharing food, we can also exchange what we've seen and learned. Caesar gritted his teeth, barely suppressing his anger. It's none of your business. Locke's eyes lit up. So you really have been with that she-bear all along. Do you want to mate with her? Caesar was startled for a moment. Mating had never really thought about that. He just simply wanted to stay by the round-faced bear's side. Being with her made everything feel more interesting. Even getting swatted by her paw seemed pretty good. As for mating, come to think of it, he actually hasn't mated with a she-bear before. If he were to mate with Shijia, wouldn't that mean he could sleep in the same den with her? Thinking about it that way, that does sound pretty good. But then another thought occurred. Bears with blood relations are usually troublesome. For example, Caesar glanced subtly at Locke beside him. But then again, bear cubs are usually raised by the mother. It doesn't have much to do with him. However, thinking about it again, right now he just wants to follow the round-faced bear. Shijia already has two extra cubs with her now. If he were to get her pregnant himself, wouldn't that mean she'd have at least 3 cubs following her? Just imagining the round-faced bear with 3 cubs following her. One of them is actually his own biological cub. Wouldn't that make him even more nervous and irritable? Then can we still let him get close? Absolutely not. We absolutely cannot have one more cub. Locke doesn't know. His cold-blooded older brother has already turned it over in his mind. All sorts of twists and turns, still immersed in the joy of Caesar wanting to mate. This means he can prove that Caesar is a normal polar bear just like him. Locke instantly feels that his relationship with Caesar has grown much closer. But soon he faces another dilemma. But I think I smell the scent of cubs, he said, giving Caesar an unexpected glance. Why didn't you bite those 2 cubs to death? This really doesn't fit Caesar's male nature, usually with his temperament. When encountering cubs, he either ignores them or casually bites them to death, Locke muttering, and also, why does the scent of those 2 cubs feel so familiar too? It's like I've smelled it somewhere before, Caesar said in a low voice. Those are Kaya's cubs. Hearing this, Locke exclaimed in surprise, Kaya? Didn't he die? It's been so long. His cubs are still alive? Looking into Caesar's silent eyes. In Locke's mind, a sudden, unbelievable guess surges up. That mother bear adopted the cubs Kaya left behind and has raised them until now. Caesar took in his surprise and disbelief. His eyes also concealed inner turmoil. He too had been shocked when he first learned of this matter. But after staying by Shishia's side for a long time, it suddenly seemed perfectly reasonable. He was, after all, a special bear himself. After Locke's shock subsided, a complex, indescribable emotion welled up in his heart. He muttered to himself, if a bear can adopt 2 other cubs who have no relation to him, why can't my mother live with me? Why must polar bears live independently? Caesar's eyes flickered, his gaze turning somewhat strange. He warned in a low voice, calling his name. Locke snapped back to attention. He grumbled, I won't bring this up again. His eyes then darted around mischievously, and he asked Caesar with a wicked grin, you still haven't told me. Why didn't you kill those 2 little cubs? Were you afraid the mother bear would fight you to the death? That doesn't seem like you. Locke chuckled, deliberately being provocative. It doesn't matter. After all, those 2 cubs aren't his own. Killing them wouldn't be a big deal, right? If it really comes to it, I'll go for you. He originally just wanted to see Caesar's embarrassed reaction. Who knew Caesar would simply sit down on the spot, looking at him with a half smile and saying, fine, then you go. Faced with his cold-blooded brother's unexpected response, Locke froze completely. Baba said, are you really going to make me go? It was the first time Caesar spoke to Locke so gently and kindly. Didn't you say you wanted to help me? Then I'll leave it to you. Locke wanted to back out. Maybe we should just forget it. Before he could finish his sentence, Caesar bared his sharp, cold teeth. A hidden threat gleamed in his eyes. Wasn't it you who said you wanted to help me? Locke was stunned, wanting to take it back. He had no choice but to take 2 steps toward the lake. He couldn't help but turn back and tentatively ask, So I'm really going? Caesar remained calm and composed. Go. Locke took 2 more jogging steps. He still wanted to struggle one last time. He turned back, his eyes pleading, I'm really going. Caesar remained completely unmoved. He even subtly pressured him to move forward. Lowering his voice, he threatened, go quickly. Poor Locke, under the pressure of his cold-blooded older brother, looked back with every step, but finally jogged toward the icy lakeside. Whatever, anyway, his size was bigger than that mother bear's. The cub wasn't his own either. Maybe after a little show of force, the mother bear would just give up the cub. Caesar watched Locke's retreating figure, a rare trace of sympathy flashing in his gaze. After a while, he slowly stood up and followed in Locke's footprints. By the time he reached the lakeside, the fight had just ended. Locke's fur was disheveled, and there were 2 bloody gashes on his ears. The blood seeped out, staining his white fur messy and dirty. At this moment, he was tightly covering his nose with both paws. Upon seeing Caesar, it was as if he had seen a savior. He scrambled and hid behind him. He's so fierce, this is way too fierce. How can there be such a fierce mother bear? And on the other side, Shijia was leisurely licking his raised paw, smoothing out the disheveled fur. His slender, long nails glinted coldly. Shijia glanced darkly toward Caesar's back, scaring Locke into shrinking back even further. Just a moment ago from afar, he saw this bear waddling over eagerly, opening his mouth and demanding he hand over the cub. Before he could even react, Shijia raised a paw and gave him a thorough thrashing. In just a couple of hits, he was howling in pain, retreating straight backward. Shijia pressed the advantage, making sure he learned his lesson once and for all. He even gave a couple of swipes to the bear's rear. Right now, Locke sitting in the snow, it's not noticeable. But once he stands up and walks a few circles, the bare but missing fur on his backside will definitely be very eye-catching. Caesar had long anticipated this scene. Just thinking about how this foolish bear had threatened him earlier made him angry, but now he finally felt avenged. Locke hid for a while, realizing Shijia had no intention of continuing to attack him. Only then did he tentatively emerge from behind the cold-blooded brother king. Then he took a few steps forward and smiled ingratiatingly toward Shijia. Caesar. His gaze immediately fell on the furless patch on his rear. Though it's not that serious. It's just bloody. Caesar let out a shout. This was something he hadn't expected. He gave Shijia a rather surprised look. His eyes clearly held the words, you struck so heavily. Shijia snorted coldly. Don't think he doesn't know what's going on. This bear looks quite capable. But in fact, it's terribly timid. After being slapped a couple of times by him, it immediately surrendered. One look and you can tell it was forced to come here. Shijia's gaze fell on Locke. The male bear that had been beaten instantly stiffened its body. It could only let out a couple of dry, awkward chuckles. Shijia swept a glance at Locke, then looked at Caesar. Suddenly, he spoke kindly to Locke. Did I strike a bit too heavily? Sorry about that. Don't be afraid, come here. The 2 male bears looked at each other. For a moment, neither could be sure what he meant. After a while, Locke tentatively took 2 steps forward. Stammering, he asked me, right. Come over, I'm going to properly make it up to you. Hearing this, Locke instantly turned his head and cast a pleading look toward his cold-blooded older brother. But Caesar immediately averted his gaze, sat down with a thud, and looked up at the sky. Locke suddenly felt hurt. He turned to look at Shijia again, swallowed hard, then closed his eyes, and walked forward, ready to face his doom. But to his surprise, Shijia from his pile of fish picked out the largest fish and pushed it with his mouth and claws in front of Locke. Eat, he had just finished saying, when Caesar, who had been pretending to admire the scenery, immediately turned his head and looked at Shijia in disbelief. Locke's tightly shut eyes suddenly relaxed. He looked at the fish in front of him in astonishment. Locke carefully studied Shijia's expression. After confirming he wasn't joking, he instantly swept away his previous anxious and fearful demeanor and said cheerfully, then I won't stand on ceremony. The newly joined foolish bear hugged the fish and ate it with great relish. But the other bear behind him couldn't hold back his feelings. Caesar watched as Locke hugged the fish and devoured it heartily. The joy from yesterday when Shijia actively shared fish with him vanished completely. The imbalance in his heart reached its peak. Why, after so many days, does he get beaten for sneaking to fish? And even the fish Shijia actively gave him yesterday was the smallest one picked out. This foolish bear just got beaten up once and gets the largest fish. It's not fair. Yet Locke, completely unaware of the storm raging in his brother's heart, gulped down the fish Shijia gave him. Both male bears equally disliked fish fins. Yesterday, Caesar not only ate the meat connected to the fins, but even swallowed the fins whole into his stomach. Today, it was Locke's turn. Still being picky, he left the piece of meat connected to the fin behind. He even disdainfully prepared to dig a hole and bury it. Locke had just cheerfully dug open the snow layer when he immediately heard Caesar's gloomy voice saying, "Eat it clean." At first, he didn't react, but upon turning his head, he met Caesar's icy gaze. The male bear, utterly enraged, stood by the remains, baring his teeth and threatening his younger brother to eat it clean. Not a single bit was to be left. Poor Locke only felt that Caesar must have lost his mind, but he didn't dare say anything. Under Caesar's forceful stare, he silently ate all the picky leftovers into his stomach. Shijia was stunned for a moment. He had originally thought Caesar would snatch the fish back and eat it, but the situation before him was unexpected. What is this about? The next second, he saw Caesar suddenly raise his head, giving him a resentful and angry look. Then walking to the lakeside and sitting down with his back turned. On the other side, Locke, having eaten Shijia's fish, immediately felt the threat had been lifted. He approached Shijia and struck up a conversation. "Thank you for the fish." Locke sat beside Shijia, savoring the taste of the fish, still longing for more. His gaze wandered between the seal meat and the nearby pile of fish. Circling once, he decided to get closer to Shijia. "Caesar said you adopted two bear cubs, right?" Shijia casually replied, "Yes." "Why do you ask? Could it be that you're still plotting against the little bear?" Noticing the dangerous glint that instantly appeared in Shijia's eyes, Locke hurriedly said, "I wouldn't bite the cub. I really like cubs. I have a cub too. But only one." As soon as the words were spoken, Caesar, sitting by the lake, his ears twitched imperceptibly. Shijia was also quite surprised. "Don't male bears lack any concept of parenthood?" Locke chuckled twice. "That was my first bear cub." He puffed out his chest as he said this. "Grew up really well. A whole size bigger than cubs of the same age. And very lively. Already started learning to hunt." He described it in such detail. Shijia was somewhat astonished. "Have you gone to see the mother bear and the cub?" Locke's body stiffened slightly. He stole a glance at Caesar, making sure he had no reaction, then lowered his voice and said, "Yes. I've watched them from afar many times." Shijia was also puzzled. "Haven't you ever approached them?" Locke immediately hung his head. Very dejected, "No." Shijia understood. Polar bears have no concept of fatherhood. Locke acknowledging his identity as a father was already very strange. Regardless of whether Locke is the biological father of the cub, the mother bear would most likely prevent him from getting close to the cub. "Do you want to go see your little bear cub?" Locke's eyes lit up, then dimmed again. He looked at Caesar's back and whispered, "I want to, but I can't go see them." Shijia noticed his gaze. "The cub is his and the mother bear's offspring. What does it have to do with Caesar? Caesar won't let you go see the cub." Caesar's twitching ears suddenly stopped. Locke was also stunned for a moment, then hurriedly denied it. "No, then why do you keep looking at him?" Locke played dumb. "Do I?" Shijia was very firm. "Yes, you do. The two bears were at a stalemate for a moment." Locke was the first to give in. In a voice as small as could be, he rapidly said, "He probably doesn't like me going to see the cub, right?" Hearing this, Shijia was somewhat speechless. These two brothers are really strange enough. Caesar says he wants Locke to be independent, but brings him back not long after. He says he doesn't want to bother with Locke, but in reality, all his actions influence him. At this moment, Locke, fearing this topic would continue, hurriedly said, "I'm not full yet." Shijia snapped back to reality, looking at the shameless brother before him. "What now? He wouldn't want to eat his fill from his prey, would he?" Locke's gaze fell on the seal meat. He chuckled slyly twice. Could this seal meat?" Shijia opened his mouth. Before he could even speak, Caesar's furious voice already rang out beside them. "No," he said. Caesar has already rushed over from the lakeside, using his body to separate Shijia and Locke. Locke was stunned. Why weren't the ones he ate before just dragged away by him as he pleased? He couldn't understand. Why was Caesar's reaction so intense? Caesar shifted 2 steps to the side. His bare paw blocked Locke's view of the meat. Instead, he turned his head to stare at Shijia. Shijia was somewhat confused. He could only look back at him expressionlessly. The two bears stared at each other for a long time. A trace of grievance suddenly leaked into Caesar's eyes. Shijia was stunned. Before he could react, Caesar suddenly lowered his head and nudged the meat forward again. It meant it wasn't to be shared with him. Shijia was shocked. It seemed he had never agreed from start to finish to share the meat with Locke. That fish just now was purely a momentary mischievous impulse on his part. Had he provoked him too harshly? Shishia's gaze at Caesar took on an additional layer of shimmering moisture. He was used to Caesar's either domineering or shameless side. This resentful state of his was the first time he had seen it. Who knew Caesar misinterpreted his gaze? He turned his head and glared fiercely at Locke, then turned back. The grievance in his eyes had turned into resigned acceptance. Lowering his head, he squeezed out a few words through gritted teeth. If you really don't want to eat it, then you take it and feed it to the cub. Shishia's mind went blank for a moment. What does it mean? When did he say he didn't want to eat anymore? And did he hear correctly? Caesar told him to share the meat with the little bear cub. Doesn't he hate them the most? After Caesar finished speaking, he sat in place staring straight at Shijia, seeming to want to wait for a response from him. Shijia finally forced out to dry laughs and said flatly, "Oh, then I'll take it for the little bear to eat." Caesar's expression suddenly darkened. The whole bear sank into a wilted aura, seeming unable to believe he could say such a thing. And Locke, who was nearby, finally couldn't hold back and sat in the back, laughing uncontrollably, rocking back and forth. Shijia was baffled by Caesar's reaction. What's wrong now? Didn't he say to share it with the little bear? So annoying, bears. The heart of a male bear is like a needle at the bottom of the sea. Wouldn't it be better to just say what you mean? Shijia lifted his paw, pushed Caesar aside, rolled his eyes at him, picked up the seal meat from the ground, and headed toward where the little bear was hiding. Caesar watched longingly as Shijia walked off with the meat in his mouth, without even looking back, making him even more frustrated. That was something he specifically brought back for him. A whole seal. It was hard to drag, he didn't even have time to take a bite himself. He abandoned half of it, then dragged the half with better meat quality, hurried over without stopping for a moment. The more Caesar thought about it, the more unbalanced he felt inside. Looking at Locke's increasingly dangerous gaze. What's so great about this stupid bear? Shijia liked him so much from the start. Locke quickly took 2 steps back, thinking to himself, indeed, a male bear whose head is clouded by mating season has no rationality. He cleared his throat. If you want to mate with a female bear, you can't be as domineering as before. You need to be patient and try to show your gentle side. Who knew the next second that paw lifted up and gave him a hard smack on the head? Who said I want to mate with her? Locke looked at him in surprise, thinking, no way. Not wanting to mate. Then why is he clinging to that female bear and going through so much trouble to bring her food? Locke choked back and ultimately didn't say these words, wisely changing his tone. All right. Do you want to be friends with the female bear? Locke remembered Shishia's appearance and muttered, why is that female bear so round? She doesn't look like us either. So strange. Caesar snatched the microphone. What's strange about it? Some polar bears are even yellowish. That may be so. But I've only ever seen one bear that looks like her. Locke continued to grumble. Caesar didn't think much of it. It's just rare, that's all. Besides, what's wrong with being round? Isn't it quite good looking? Locke was speechless. Do you really think he's good looking? He is just very good looking. I think he's better looking than most polar bears. As he spoke, Caesar even glanced sideways at Locke, disdainfully adding, especially bears like you. Locke, caught in the crossfire, felt a breath stuck in his chest. After holding it in for a long time, he finally managed to say, you look just like me. Only a bit bigger than me, that's all. But Caesar had already walked far away. Shijia divided the seal meat into 3 portions. The 2 little bears held their own portions and gnawed away with great relish. After the hearty meal, Shijia groomed his fur, which was stained with blood. But he noticed Caesar sitting behind him, watching him sneakily. The scorching gaze moved from his ears to his paws and finally to his rear. Shijia felt creeped out by the stare. He couldn't help but give Caesar a swat with his paw. Under Locke's astonished gaze, Caesar raised his paw and touched the spot where Shijia had hit him. Shook his fur, a strange satisfaction showing in his expression. Shijia felt a chill and gave him a few more swats, only after he had knocked that suffocating state out of Caesar. Did he stop? The sky was already growing dark. Caesar sat by the lake, letting Shijia glare at him until his eyes were almost popping out. He had no reaction. He even asked him, "It's getting late. Aren't we going back yet?" Shijia was instantly speechless. That was his den. What do you mean we're not going back yet? They have no relationship at all. Stop trying to act so familiar. Besides, he wouldn't think that just because he's bringing the little cub, he would let those two male bears follow behind. And all return to the cave together, right? The sky finally turned completely dark. Caesar seemed to suddenly realize the key point. He turned and came before Locke, who had been amusing himself by the lakeside, rolling around. His voice was cold and hard. "When are you leaving?" Locke stopped his movement. He looked up inexplicably at his cold-blooded older brother. "What?" Caesar was somewhat impatient. He asked again. "When are you leaving?" "We are going back." Locke was stunned. "Go back where? Aren't polar bears supposed to sleep wherever they go? Why use the word go back?" Caesar bared his teeth, threatening him to leave quickly. "Don't delay us." Locke looked at him. In almost the blink of an eye, his eyes were already glistening with tears. Then he suddenly hugged his paw, repeating his old trick, crying his heart out. "I'm not leaving unless you bite me to death. Otherwise, I absolutely won't leave." While Locke was clinging desperately to Caesar's paw, preferring to take a beating rather than let go, Gia stood watching for a while, then turned and quietly slipped away with the two little cubs, leaving the two male bears by the lake to continue their entanglement. As night fell, one large and two small bears quickly fell asleep. I don't know how long it passed. Suddenly, there were faint, sparse, tiny sounds by my ear, immediately followed by the male bear's scent drilling into my nasal cavity. Shijia drowsily opened his eyes. Gathering his spirits, he poked his head out of the den. Caesar was already guarding the den entrance at some unknown time. Locke had long since disappeared without a trace. Shijia was dazed for a moment. His eyes looked blankly at Caesar for quite a long while, before he snapped back to reality. Couldn't help but glance at him a couple more times, finally withdrew back into the den. The next morning, the male bear outside was sleeping sprawled out. The two bear cubs inside the den were already awake. They were no longer as afraid of Caesar as before, but still didn't dare to run out of the den on their own. Shijia sat inside the den in a daze for a while. When he climbed out again, Caesar was already awake, lying in the snow, a pair of eyes gazing darkly at him. He got a fright. His paw pressed irritably on Caesar's nose, not with much force, but it seemed to flip some sort of switch. Caesar immediately let out an owl, lifted his paw to cover his nose, preparing to throw a tantrum. That strange atmosphere from just now dissipated completely. Shijia felt relieved in his heart, and just like usual, kept pawing at Caesar, signaling him to move away from the den entrance. Caesar also, just like usual, stubbornly refused to leave the den entrance, watching from not far away as Shijia brought the cubs out. Leading the cubs towards the lake, he shook off his fur, slowly followed behind, just arrived at the lakeside, and saw a bear come trotting over, bouncing along. "I'm here again. Brother Bear is here to play third wheel again." Looking at Locke trotting over, Shijia suddenly turned her head to glare at Caesar, silently questioning him why Locke was still here. Caesar looked embarrassed, averted his gaze. Locke didn't notice at all that he was unwelcome, trotted over with light, brisk steps, first rubbed against Caesar ingratiatingly, then took the initiative to greet Shijia. Shijia took 2 steps back. The little bear cub hid behind her legs, peeking out to size up this extra male bear. At this moment, Locke actively tilted his head to speak to the 2 little bear cubs. "Have you seen me before?" Xiaobai immediately pulled her head back, hid behind Shijia. Diebai also shrank back, but stopped almost immediately, after hesitating for a while, said softly that he had seen him. This male bear had never actively attacked them before. He would even avoid them from afar when he caught their scent. When their mother led them and encountered him, she was always much more relaxed than when meeting other male bears. Mother had said before that he was a bear with no ambition, and that they must never end up like him. Diebai looked at Locke with a bit more curiosity in his eyes. This male bear looked quite strong too. Why did Mom say he was good for nothing? Locke had seen these 2 cubs before. The older one was quite brave. The younger one often rode on Kaya's back. Locke looked at Diebai with a strange expression. "What's wrong?" Diebai looked at Shijia again. Shijia thought he was scared, and secretly gave him an encouraging look. A bear like Locke, he could fight 3 of them. And so, the much-despised male bear, under the innocent gaze of the cub, received a soul-piercing question. Mom said you were a good-for-nothing bear before. Why, the male bear, who originally wanted to make a good impression and gain some favor, was stunned. Caesar, not far away, heard the little cub's question and couldn't help but look back at the petrified Locke. He snorted with laughter. Shijia held back. Finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Burst out laughing. Locke stiffened for a moment, then suddenly said generously, "That's right. Maybe I really am a good-for-nothing bear." He stretched his neck to look behind Shijia, wanting to reply, trying to remember the name of that timid little cub. But unfortunately, he couldn't recall it. He could only say, "When I was little, I was as timid as your brother." Xiaobai, hiding behind Shijia, heard his words and immediately buried his head under Shishia's belly. Locke looked at his appearance and smiled, saying proudly, "But look, aren't I living just fine now? I am very happy every day. My brother Caesar will protect me." Caesar heard his words, couldn't help but be taken aback, somewhat annoyed. Locke was saying these unambitious words again. But deep down, there was more of some other strange feeling. Bai had already poked half his body out from behind Shijia. Hearing Locke's words, his eyes lit up a little, looked back at Xiaobai, who was already too ashamed to raise his head. A flicker of emotion passed through his eyes. He said softly, "I want that too." Xiaobai is very happy every day. As soon as the words fell, Shijia noticed Xiaobai's body burrowing under his belly. Suddenly stopped. Locke laughed twice. "Then you have to protect it well. One big, one small." The conversation between the two bears ignored the survival laws of polar bears, as if the two little bears would live together for a lifetime. Now, it's unclear whether this is right or wrong. Bai and Xiaobai miraculously survived. The cubs lost their mother, so they rely on each other for survival. People always say to break the rules. Live according to your heart. Perhaps bears are the same. After this conversation, the two little bears became much closer to Locke. They would, with Shijia accompanying them, talk to him. Although Locke is an unambitious male bear, Xiaobai seems very interested in him. Already able to walk out from behind Shijia, sitting beside Bai listening to him tell stories, his courage has grown quite a bit. For this reason, after thinking for a long time, Shijia still risked letting the two little bears come into contact with Locke. For several days in a row, Locke was very well behaved, sitting properly to the side, not actively getting too close to the little bears. Only then did Shijia reluctantly deem him qualified. However, most of the time it was Locke joking around. He fabricated many of his wondrous adventures in the Arctic to harvest the admiring gazes of the two little bears. Shijia listened from the side until he heard Locke say, "I climbed to the highest point of the snowy mountain. Watched the sunrise there." Shijia couldn't help but roll his eyes. Steep cliffs plus snow layers. It's very difficult for a male bear to climb up, especially for a male bear like Locke, who's plump and well-fed. That makes it even more difficult. The two little bears looked at him with starry eyes. Locke sat in place, held his head high, enjoying the envious looks from the two cubs. Shishia's paw had just touched his back. Before even applying any force, the male bear was already scared and jumped up, looking with lingering fear at Shishia's empty bare paw. Shishia waved his paw to shoo him away. "All right, your task for today is done. Go stay over there." Locke instantly put away his terrified appearance, lay on the ground, closed his eyes and didn't move. He stared at him for a long while, then said with displeasure, "The fish are at the shore." The male bear instantly scrambled up from the ground, shook his fur, and walked toward the shore in high spirits. Locke lay by the lakeside, contentedly enjoying his reward. 3 fish, for an ordinary male bear, would barely be enough to fill the gaps between teeth. But for the gluttonous Locke, this was simply the best possible return. Shijia watched him eating with great relish. In his heart, he felt there was actually little difference between him and a cub. After returning the 2 cubs behind the snowdrift, he came back to the lakeside and began to practice swimming, using his front paws to paddle and propel himself forward. Just then, a faint sound of something entering the water suddenly reached his ears. The water flow around Shijia was disturbed. A massive creature approached him along the current. Caesar caught up to Shishia's side in no time. He didn't make a sound, just followed him closely. Shijia knew he was sulking again because of the differential treatment. But he couldn't let Caesar come into contact with the cubs. That could only be blamed on him for showing killing intent toward the cubs from the very beginning. Moreover, his personality was domineering, not timid and harmless like Locke. The two bears soaked silently in the water. Caesar followed and swam for a while. The movement of his front paws suddenly became much larger. Bear paws slapped and splashing right into Shishiya's eyes. A sudden chill and astringent sensation washed over him. Shishiya immediately closed his eyes. He endured for a while, seeing that Caesar had no intention of stopping. Anger also flared up in his heart. Silently, he swam toward the shore. Caesar noticed his movement. Only then did he notice his tightly closed eyes. The motion of his paws in the water suddenly stiffened. A flash of helplessness passed through his eyes. Finally, he also quietly followed him ashore. Shishiya sat by the lake. He closed his eyes and calmed himself for a moment before barely managing to open them. He found the male bear sitting opposite him, head hanging low, bare paws pawing at the snow on the ground. Ignoring him for a while, a furry paw silently rested on his back. Immediately after, his body was nudged. Shishiya's anger surged. He roared toward the side, "Get away from me!" Then stood up and moved 2 steps to the side. Caesar's raised paw hung in midair. Finally, he sheepishly lowered it. His dark eyes held confusion and grievance. After his outburst, Shishiya also felt some regret. It wasn't that he was overly kind-hearted or afraid of offending Caesar, but rather his anger had clouded his reason. He had forgotten that animals cannot be measured by human standards. Such physical contact mostly signifies a friendly gesture. It could also be a compromise or an apology. Shishiya opened his mouth. The brown bear was already shrouded in gloom. A pair of eyes looked at him, melancholy and resentful. And of all times, right at this moment, Locke came trotting over again, with a fish in his mouth. It was a fish other than the 3 that Shishiya had given him. He mumbled, asking if he could eat this one. But before Shishiya could even speak, Locke was already lying on the spot, eating it in big mouthfuls. A sudden cold laugh came from the side. Shishiya looked up and saw that Caesar had already turned and left. Shishiya wasn't sure if he should chase after him. After all, if Caesar got angry, he might never pester him again. This was a good opportunity for the little bear to get out of danger. But Caesar had also been slowly changing during this time. He had restrained his malice toward the little bear, and had just been staying by his side. If he didn't intend to harm the little bear, Shishiya thought he could be a somewhat domineering and annoying, but not ill-intentioned friend. It's a pity that it's precisely the most crucial point. Regarding the little bear's safety, what Caesar had always given him were ambiguous answers and occasional bursts of malice. After thinking it over repeatedly, Shishiya still did not chase after him. Locke saw Caesar leave, still not understanding what had happened. He quickly followed behind with the fish in his mouth. Shishiya watched the 2 bears disappear, and felt a sense of relief in his heart, but also felt a bit empty. He silently accepted this as the end of a friendship. After confirming it was safe, he then called the 2 little bears to come out, follow him to learn fishing, practice swimming, teach them survival knowledge as much as possible. Then, as usual, in the evening, take the 2 little ones back to the cave. Only this time, Caesar wasn't following behind. However, in the middle of the night, Shishiya was sleeping deeply. A familiar scent drifted into his nostrils again. Immediately after, came the muffled sound of bear paws landing on the snow. Shishiya's eyes snapped open. As soon as he poked his head out, he met a pair of black eyes. Caesar was just standing at the cave entrance, his fur disheveled by the wind. Who knows how long he had been waiting? Shishiya went out to a spot far from the cave entrance. Caesar followed behind, not initiating conversation. Another long silence ensued. Shishiya finally sighed. "Why are you back again?" Caesar seemed dissatisfied with his words. "Don't you want me to come back?" Shishiya knew he was still angry with me, and couldn't be bothered to dwell on the comeback in his words. He didn't want to deepen the conflict with him. Said no. Caesar took a step forward. With anger. "Why did you let Locke interact with the cub? And even share food with him?" Shishiya was somewhat baffled. Not interacting with the cub was an agreement between him and Caesar. Locke had no such agreement. As for sharing food, ever since Locke arrived, the fish hasn't been enough to eat. Caesar would take him out hunting. Sometimes they would drag back a seal. Sometimes it would be something else. These prey would be shared with Shishiya. So Shishiya would reciprocate the courtesy, and also share fish with them. Caesar's share was no less than Locke's. It might even be a bit more. Shishiya's strange gaze fell upon Caesar, making the male bear also feel somewhat awkward. Caesar knew that getting angry with Shishiya over this reason was very inexplicable. But he was just unhappy. He could clearly feel Shijia treated him differently from how she treated Locke. Shijia could gather together with Locke and play with the two bear cubs, but he could only watch from afar, not allowed to get close. Locke could act coquettishly and ask Shijia for fish to eat. Shijia would give it to him. But he had also acted coquettishly with Shijia before. Shijia would always swat him with her paw. The more he thought about it, the more it didn't sit right with the male bear, who immediately continued to accuse her. He acts coquettishly with you. You give him food. Why can't I? Hearing this, Shijia stunned Caesar. Locke acting coquettishly is done under the premise that he hasn't done anything wrong. That's called acting coquettishly. Every time you roll around in the snow, it's after you've done something wrong. That's called throwing a tantrum. It's too complicated. The male bear simply couldn't understand. He growled lowly that he was also a male bear. Don't you also let him get close to the bear cubs? The problem has returned to the starting point. Shijia could no longer tolerate it. That was because if you got close to the cub, there was a possibility of biting him to death. But Locke would not. As soon as the words fell, both bears fell silent. They both knew very well in their hearts what Shijia said was right. Caesar wasn't sure if he might act on a whim either. Suddenly take a bite at the cub. For polar bears, this is the most normal thing. Not killing the cub is abnormal. But Locke is precisely the abnormal one. Polar bears are born unable to bite their own kind, no matter how well he acts or how ferocious he seems. Caesar knows that to this day, he has never delivered a fatal bite to any polar bear, even if it was just a helpless cub. The wound on his nose was left by a cub. That little cub is now an adult. Caesar stopped talking and walked towards another direction. Before parting, he paused, looked back deeply at Shijia, and finally disappeared into the night. Shijia took a deep breath. He thought this should be the end. Finally over. After Caesar left that night, he never came back. Shijia was in a bad mood for 2 days. Then let it go. Continued living with the two cubs. Life is always full of partings. So is a bear's life. The only difference is, Locke will still appear by the lake. He came to play with the little bear. He said Caesar doesn't pay much attention to him anymore. To avoid being discovered by other male bears and being bullied again, he decided to stay away from those male bears. Locke lived apart from his kind for a few days. Unable to bear the loneliness, he simply came to find the little bear. Shijia's observation period for him has finally completely ended. He can now play and roughhouse with the little bear. The ice island in the center of the lake has long since disappeared. In another 2 days, he might not be able to bring the little bear here anymore. Locke also realized this. Suddenly jumped up. Oh no, it's already this late. The ice floe might have already drifted away. If we don't board the ice floe now, I'm afraid we'll have to stay on the island this year, he said. As he spoke, Locke had already stood up, hurriedly walking in one direction. Locke walked halfway, then turned back. Aren't you coming with me? Although there are many bears on the ice floe, the summer ice floe, compared to the winter glacier, is much harder to move on. Especially for male bears, afraid of collapsing the ice. The probability of them chasing down a little bear would be greatly reduced. But Shijia replied, this summer, I'm staying on the island. Because he knew a polar bear can endure in the water for 4 or 5 hours and swim dozens of kilometers under the pressure of death. They can even travel over 100 kilometers. This is their trump card for surviving on the floating ice. But he himself cannot do it. Locke looked at Shijia in surprise. He kindly advised, why don't you consider staying on the island for the summer? It's not just about food scarcity. But Shijia's gaze was firm. He had already made up his mind, I know. But this year I can only stay on the island. Seeing that he wasn't planning to change his mind, Locke thought to himself, so stubborn. Then I'll go first. He needed to catch up to the floating ice, and also find Caesar before catching up to the floating ice. Although he's a cold-blooded older brother, but being with Caesar, he would feel more secure. Shijia bid farewell to Locke, finally having time to calm down and properly plan for the future. It's just Caesar. Even Locke told him, food on the island in summer is very scarce. Shijia was not blindly optimistic. He was thinking, is there any way to stockpile some food in advance? At this moment, Shijia's gaze fell on the ice lake before him. Freshly caught sea fish, as long as they are not left on the snow for too long, will naturally contain salt. Since arriving in the Arctic, Shijia was finally able to apply human knowledge once. He found a place with strong wind and ample sunlight, and quickly built a mud platform. In the following days, Shijia spent all his afternoons, all spent on fishing, then transport the fish to the drying platform. Although they didn't know what Shijia was doing, the two little furballs still obediently helped, running back and forth without a single complaint. On the other side, when Locke rushed to the coast, the ice floe hadn't completely drifted away yet. He breathed a sigh of relief, looked around, followed the scent and found Caesar by the seaside. Locke felt a surge of joy in his heart, happily ran over. Caesar glanced back at him and then averted his gaze, laying down on a huge rock by the sea. Locke moved close to his face. Once he opened his mouth, he couldn't stop. It's already this late. Why haven't you boarded the ice floe yet? Are you waiting for me? I'm so touched. Caesar closed his eyes, enduring Locke's chattering, till he heard him say Shijia said. He's not boarding the ice floe. He's staying on the island. So strange, there's no food on the island at all. How will he raise the little bear if he stays on the island? And also, why haven't you gone to see him recently? Caesar opened his eyes upon hearing this news. He didn't feel surprised in his heart. Locke only stopped when he ran out of things to say. Looked down and noticed Caesar's eyes were tightly shut, clearly showing he hadn't been listening at all. He wasn't angry either, just paused for a moment before continuing. Caesar, it's almost too late. Let's quickly board the ice floe. Caesar opened his eyes and looked at the sea ice by the shore. He didn't know how much time had passed before he finally said softly, I won't go onto the sea ice this year.